Grab a stack of rockin' in my outer space is more like it. Let's bring on tonight's guest. First of all, we have co-host Dr. Kathryn. We have co-host Mr. Tim Durling, and special guest all the way from London, Ontario, Canada. We have Glen, Archie Gamble of Helix, The Joys of Buffalo Brothers, and so many more.
I get around, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to the show. Round. Can everyone hear everyone?
I am getting round, actually, but, you know, yes.
Well, Glen, thank you so much for coming on to the show tonight. We're going to be talking about your career. We're going to be talking about some opinions and other fun stuff, but I'm going to let Dr. Kathryn take over because she has to run. She just had an album out today.
Excellent. I saw it online.
There it is.
And I wish her good luck and congratulations on Facebook and now in person via technology.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a little shameless promotion, but available today. Info's on my website. So yeah, I got two questions for you. So I'll start with my first one here. My first question is, can you tell us about hearing Helix as a young Canadian and how and why they grabbed you and made you a fan?
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to start this off, actually. It's chronological, too. I'm sure you guys know the history of Helix. They had a huge club following before they were signed to Capitol Records. And they used to play at a bar in Brantford, the Red Onion it was called. And I had two older brothers that were 7 and 8 years older than me and a year apart of each other. They would go see Helix in the clubs. And at one point, Helix had sold over 10,000 independent albums of their White Lace and Black Leather and the Breaking Loose. That was what got Capitol's attention. And I remember my brothers coming home and talking about them. I don't know if they had the albums or not. And then, of course, you know, when Capitol picked them up, and I think it was 82, 83, and just, you know, it exploded in Canada. Like, if you remember, Much Music played the hell out of Helix all the time. Radio was playing them. And that was like every other teenager, you know. I went and saw them on Much Music and heard them on the radio and spent my money, went to the Sound Record Man and A&A and bought used my allowance to buy my Helix cassettes, you know. So I was a fan before I was actually ever in the band. So that was, you know, as a typical teenager, I had heard of them as a younger kid, and then in my teens, as their career progressed, I became a fan. Yeah. Who's your friend, by the way?
This is Daisy.
Oh, my Lord. Hello, beautiful. Hello. Look at that beautiful face. Even everything. Yes, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Okay. So anyway, the second question.
Oh, is it me again?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's actually a perfect segue into my second question, because my second one is, are you also an animal lover?
Oh, very, very much so. I presently don't have any pets because I've been moving around a lot, and I just settled into an apartment on my own, in my name, and I'm going down to Mexico to do some playing this winter. Then when I get back, I plan on getting another cat.
Nice.
So yeah, I absolutely love it. And I'm fascinated with primates.
Yeah.
Absolutely I watch every documentary I can get my hands on. In particular, I love orangutans, or my favorite. Orangutans are my favorite, and gorillas. They're both very gentle by nature.
Yeah.
Gorillas fascinate me because they're so huge, and they have their diet is all you know, they don't eat meat. They're all muscle, and they could tear a man literally into pieces. But they will very rarely resort to violence, and they will give you multiple warnings before attacking. So I'm just fascinated by them, how much we share 98.9% of the same DNA or something like that. So pretty wild. So yeah, I'm an animal lover. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Breaking new ground on Grab a Stack of Rock. We are now covering biology, animal biology, anthropology. Thank you, Glen. And thanks, Dr. Kathryn. Real quick before you go, tell us where you can buy the album or listen to it.
Yeah, so it is just launched today, Anatomy of the Recovering Brain. So performed by me, music by Frank Horvat. You can find it on my Bandcamp page, which you can link to that through my website, which is kathrynladano.com. It's also, if you stream music, it's available on all streaming platforms right now as well. But if you like to support artists, Bandcamp's the thing. Because I can get paid that way.
Yes.
It's available and download as well. You will go to the page that there's 6 tracks, and you do have the option of downloading them individually, but the piece is meant to be a 60-minute complete piece. So I don't encourage downloading the tracks. It really needs to be heard as a complete album.
Well, I know what I'm doing with my Friday night now after this.
Nice.
Cool.
Thanks, Glen.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. And thanks, Kathryn. Have a great night.
Yeah.
You, Daisy,
Thanks,
and Molly, too.
Yeah. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.
So now I'm going to throw it over to my... There you go. I'm going to throw it over to my good...
Sorry, I put in all these little asides. I do it on my own vlog, too. I apologize. I'll rate it in.
We are having fun tonight. We are having... Anyway, I'm going to throw it over to my good pal here, Tim Durling. They call him the East Coast radio guru, and I can vouch for his knowledge. But Tim and I have been excited about this all week. We've been listening to the records today and talking about especially this one. And I know Tim has appreciation and Tim has questions. So why don't you take the next question, Tim?
Oh, on the spot. Well, I guess my first question would be, do you go by Glen or Archie? Like, what's your preference?
Well, my friends call me Archie, and I've had the nickname for 40 years now. I can't shake it. My mother hated it. If anyone ever called, I was at my mother's house and asked for Archie. She was a little Irish Scottish lady. She'd be like, his name is not Archie, it's Glen. But you can call me Archie. My friends call me Archie, so it's kind of a professional name, so please do.
Okay.
Archie's
okay.
fine, yeah.
It's a pleasure to speak to you. I'm a big Helix fan, all the eras, and Mike and I have talked about Helix many a time. We've done a few episodes, some on my channel, some on his. So yeah, to get to talk to someone that, I mean, you played an important role, I think, in kind of what's like keep the band together, not solely, but you were a constant during a time when there was a lot of change in the band. And I remember, I mean, I go all the way back to, I first became aware of you. We're all froze, Brian Richards says. Well, it is cold, but we can hear each other. So
we're all froze?
Yeah.
Are we back now?
I hope we're okay. Sometimes it freezes on Facebook, but YouTube should be fine. I'm getting no indication.
YouTube is fine.
All right.
Try YouTube, Brian.
But my first exposure was, of course, picking this CD up.
Which
back
I played
in
on
'98.
as well. Yeah,
and I'm a huge, I always read the credits. I always read the liner notes. And, I started to, you see this name. Oh, okay, so Fritz isn't playing on all these songs. Okay. And that's when you kind of came up on my radar. And then honestly, I guess around that time, late end of the 90s, early 2000s, I started having kids, so wasn't really buying a lot of music. And then towards the end of the 2000, the aughts, they call them, I got caught up on my Helix CDs. So yeah, I was able to get B-sides and Rockin' on My Outer Space and all that.
Yeah.
I honestly, I didn't have any prepared questions other than what do you call yourself? But so Mike kind of threw it over to me, but yeah, right now I'm going to throw it back to Mike because I'm just going to start sputtering because I can't think of anything right now. Something will come to me, cool. I'm sure.
Well, it's great to meet, even me virtually. And,
yes.
You brought up a couple of the albums that I had the privilege of playing on. There was also a live 30th anniversary concert on DVD on Capitol that I played on, and there's a couple of greatest hits compilations that Capitol took tracks from those 2 albums that I've been on, as well. So there's an assortment. I don't even have copies of all the stuff I've played on. You do, and I don't.
There's those two as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm behind on those two. Well, I'll tell you, Archie, there is something that Mike and I joke about all the time, is that I wished I'd have bought it. You guys hear that?
That's my computer.
Oh, okay.
That's my fan.
I thought aliens were landing on my roof. They're coming to take me away.
The running gag is there's one thing that you played on that I don't have that I would like to have, because I am kind of a completist and I'm kind of weird for formats. But if anybody has the cassette of this and they want to sell it to me for less than $50, let me know, because it is ridiculous if you go on Discogs and eBay, because the cassette version of Half Alive is ridiculously expensive. I suppose there would have only been one made, but
let me ask Brian. If I can get one for Brian, I'll send it to you. I'm not worried about money. Let me make a note on my phone here. I'll ask Brian after the show.
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Just let me do that real quick. Email Brian RE Helix Half Alive cassette.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll do
wow,
that.
Tim, that just happened. Tim, that just happened.
Because I think that's a couple things. I think that's the only cassette of Helix that you appear on, because
I believe so.
that was
You're
the
right.
tail end of the cassette era, and it's the only Helix cassette I don't have. So that would be wow, that's awesome. I wasn't planning on that, but that's a nice happy accident.
Oh, I mean, I'll ask him. I can't say for sure that he has it, or if he has it, he's very generous about that stuff. And here's the thing, and this is the reason why I don't have these, is because I've given them to friends and family members over the years, who generally get a couple copies of everything once an album comes out. You know, when you sign a record company typically will give you a couple boxes for the band, 50 to 100 for your friends and family. And you split them amongst the 4 or 5 band members. That's been my experience. But independent, everyone I take from Brian, he pays for it, basically, or loses a sale on. So I would only take 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Of course, they always ended up with family and friends. So my discography, my actual, I played on probably a stack of rock like this, and I've got a stack of rock like this. You know what I mean? If we're going to put it in literal terms, right?
And unfortunately,
so, if I can get it for you, I will, though. Absolutely.
That's so cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
but
no worries.
the other thing is that I'm finding that your time with Helix, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, there's no vinyl for any of that stuff, and there should be.
There isn't. And there,
Brian's put out a lot of the vinyl, but this era needs to be vinylized and brought back into popular circulation.
I've brought it up with Brian. I've also brought up, I made him an offer where I would take his book that he wrote, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, but I proofread it, do a digital ebook version of it, and he could add an update chapter.
That would be great.
He said he wanted to think about it, but I don't think he seemed too interested. This is the thing with Brian. He's very stubborn, but I'm saying that as a good trait, because it's kept him around in the business for 50 years.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if he is adamant that he's not going to do something, it doesn't get done. If he's adamant he's going to do something, you better believe it gets done. So a lot of times it has to come from him.
Yeah.
The idea to put stuff on vinyl, blah, blah. There's a few things I'd like to see happen with the back catalog. I haven't been in the band for a long time, but I would like to see that, what you suggested, exactly happen. Vinyl's huge right now. I'd love to have an album that I played on. I've only ever had one album, and I don't have it handy, but it's a 63 Monroe record that I played on, which is a punk rock group from London. I do a lot of session work, too. I was in that band for a couple years on and off, and I played on that album, one of their albums. That's the only album I own of vinyl that I've actually played on. So
it's there's something, I would think that there's something, not that a CD and a cassette is nothing, but there's something about vinyl, I'm on a record.
Yeah. And we grew up with it. We associate it with music and memories and rock and roll and childhood. I would love nothing more than be able, I've done it once, as I said, with Monroe. The feeling of cracking open the plastic, smelling the glue in the vinyl, and the printer's ink, opening it up and seeing my name on this thing. It just felt amazing. And I would love to be able to do that with both Buffalo Brothers, which was the band I was in before, and Helix. But, maybe someday Brian will. And I actually, if I can tell you a quick story, I don't want to take this too far off the beaten path, but talking about introducing formats, you see my gold record behind me. Well, that is for the Helix album, Walking the Razor's Edge, which had Rock You on it. The reason I have one in my name is I didn't play on it. But when I was in the band, Helix, Brian, Capital EMI, who owned the masters, had not put it out on CD.
Right.
Which was unbelievable. So Brian asked if he could pay to have it remastered, and he could pay to have it manufactured if they would do a licensing deal, that's what they call it. And he would sell them at shows. And I helped him promote. I hope I'm not taking one of your questions away here, Mike.
No, this is great.
I helped him promote the reissue of Walking the Razor's Edge and all the old back catalog on CD at shows. That's why he gave that to me as a thank you.
That's awesome.
After I left the band, just for that and other reasons. So, we were signing Helix vinyl when I first joined, and it was incredible. I was like, wow, people still have their collections. This was the aughts, the early aughts, as you say, when vinyl wasn't so popular. And at first, I was reluctant to sign stuff because they didn't play on it. And I'm a fan, too. And I would say to people, are you sure you want me to sign this? And finally, Daryl Gray, the bass player for Helix, he pulled me aside. He said, Archie, just be gracious, say thank you, and sign it, because people don't understand our industry. They don't care that you played on it. You're in Helix. This is their night out, and they want the drummer for Helix to sign their album.
Yeah, that's
so
good point.
Yeah, the fan and the musician. I wouldn't have Eric Singer sign my Kiss Destroyer album.
Yeah, not everybody. Yeah, I'm a real thing. Yeah, I'm a real I saw them in 2009, Vagabond Bones, and at that time it was Caleb Duck was the only non-original. Yeah. But I remember I brought all of my Helix vinyl with me, and Caleb just kind of ducked out, and the rest of the guys signed it because I felt I didn't want to tell him, no, I don't want you to sign this. But at the same time, it's like, it was just one of those situations. But I did have him sign the CD, so it was all good. But not everybody's up on who's in the band. Yeah, not everybody's up on who's in every lineup of the band, and really, I mean, with Helix, and it's not unique, but you got to, there was a time you had to keep a scorecard. There was a lot of.
Who hasn't been in Helix at this point?
There's been a lot of members come and go, and I love what you brought up about Brian's book, because that's a great read, but it stops in 2005. I mean, that's almost 20 years ago. Hard as it is to believe, and it would be great to get his. It would be great to get his take on the last 20 years and the music they've done, and I hope they do more, but. That would be a great idea to get an updated version of the Gimme an R book. It's a great read. And what I liked about reading that is, I mean, Helix toured. I mean, you guys, no matter who was in the band, you guys just toured Canada relentlessly. I'm in the eastern part of Canada, and not everybody if classic rock band comes through here, but Helix always did. But Brian wrote a lot in the book about playing in Fredericton, which is about an hour away from me. A lot of shows there.
New Brunswick is a great province, man. People don't realize what people are amazing, and it's a beautiful place. They love live music, and they don't get enough of it. Like you said, bands for some reason overlook it. They shouldn't,
Yeah, so the Maritimes isn't exactly a hotbed for for classic rock bands, but hey, is what it is. I don't know, Mike. Did I take any of your questions? Like that's
poor Mike having this for stealing the show here. Sorry, Mike.
No, that's all right. I was going to ask you about reissuing on vinyl, but I figure that's more Tim's forte anyway. I wanted to ask you about going back to probably the first time I would have been aware of anything that you did, which would be the Buffalo Brothers. And I'm kind of hazy on some of the guys from the Buffalo Brothers were eventually in Helix. And I'm kind of hazy about how the chronology of that works. Like, what do you recall about the Buffalo Brothers and eventually those guys joining Helix?
Well, first of all, see this right here. This thing can't make it out. It's a band called Nasty Class.
Here, we're going to zoom in on you so we can see it.
It's called Nasty Class.
Cool.
Okay, and that was a late 80s, early 90s cover band that was managed by Eric Gillespie of Bill Sipe Management. Bill Sipe managed Helix. So the connection goes back really deep. We came off the road. We were one of those bands that used to play 6-7 nights a week, 51 weeks a year, back and forth across Canada for a salary, and playing covers. We decided that we wanted to try and come off the road and get a record deal and write. And so Nasty Class, the name was a bit 80s. We eventually dropped it, and that morphed into Buffalo Brothers. So we had a record deal with Attic Records, which I don't know if you want to touch on that, we can later or whatever. But after that band broke up, I got offered the Helix gig. And then, you know, here's one thing I have to say, if I can squeeze this in. I was really proud of being the fact that I was the first replacement member in Helix from the legendary lineup. With the exception of Paul passing away. When Paul passed away,
right.
They got Denny Balicki from New York, but that was because they had to replace him. But when Fritz left and moved to the U.S., you know, they hired me, and I was in there for 7 years. You know, it wasn't. At first, it wasn't a revolving door of people. You know, and I know. And when I say that, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not knocking Brian. I really admire Brian and respect him. He's taught me a lot about the business. He did what he had to do to keep the train rolling. That's why they've been together 50 years. Whatever.
If I could interrupt you,
keep moving forward, right?
Yeah.
But that means
if I could interrupt you for just, if I could just interrupt you for just 1 second, for context, folks, keep in mind this is the mid '90s, and unfortunately for bands like Helix and all those other bands, like not just Helix, it was like when the asteroid hit the Earth and the dinosaurs went extinct, you know. And that's what Archie's talking about. So sorry, go on.
Someone that never liked
clarifying.
Someone that never stopped liking that music. It was rough. That's why I read about it in Metal Edge. I was so excited that there was something new by Helix. Yeah.
Well, you know what's funny? I can remember one time at the very, very bottom of the pit, we played just outside of London in the country. We played a snowmobile race in July. And the promoters were great people. They paid us in full and treated us great. But they hired us to play people racing snowmobiles in the summertime. And there was, I think, maybe 10 people in the audience. And we had Mike Hall from Killer Dwarfs on guitar, Jerry Finn from Killer Dwarfs on guitar, Dale Gray, Brian, and myself. Killer lineup. We're not playing our best, but it was just like, that was when you're going, holy, these people, like, you know, that there's not really a market for this anymore. That wasn't always like that, but for a while it was like that. And of course, there are pockets of the country where you could still go out and sell out clubs. Even though grunge was king, Helix could still go, at such a loyal following, they could still go and sell out 2 nights in Calgary or Edmonton, you know. But to actually answer Mike's question, over the years, there was so much instability in the lineup of Helix. I had approached members of Buffalo Brothers. Eventually said, if you want, I will get you an audition or get you in. And for timing or whatever reasons, it never happened. And then finally, right around 2000, when it was just a lineup of Mike Hall and Jerry dissolved, Jerry Finn, the Killer Dwarfs lineup, I call it. I said to Brian, I said, this is ridiculous. You know, we're getting people that are coming in and doing 1 or 2 shows. They're doing it because they want money, or they're doing it because they want to be able to say they played in Helix, or whatever it may be. I said, look, my guys, the Buffalo Brothers, are dependable, they're professional, they're great players, and they're here in town, more importantly. Because we had people we were scattered all over the province. At one point down, we had a guitar player from Sudbury and a guitar player from Windsor.
Yeah, Jim Lawson was from up north.
2 extreme ends of the province, right? So rehearsals were impossible. So that was what happened. So we had a good solid lineup for 2 years of, you know, another picture here, but the Buffalo Brothers guy, Sean Sanders on rhythm guitar and vocals, Stan Fountain on bass, Dan Fawcett, rest in peace, on lead guitar, and Brian and myself. And I was glad that I did that because I was able to get my friends a good gig, a couple of years, and I was able to bring Brian some stability. I take great pride in that. So, and it went well, you know.
Yeah, he writes about that in his book, how hard it was, and he had to have people that were local, because if it doesn't matter how good musicians are individually, if you don't rehearse, you'll never be tight.
It's true, right? And not to mention gathering together for things like photo shoots, which it's 2 hours out of the day. But if you've got to bring someone from Sudbury and someone from Windsor and someone from North Bay or whatever, It's expensive and ridiculous, you know what I mean? And so not just rehearsing, but you're right, but also business meetings and things like that. Or a gig, you get one gig to Southwestern Ontario. It's going to be hard to bring all these people in and make it profitable, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I wanted to also ask you a question about the band that you played in after Helix, which was the Joys.
Yeah.
With Sarah Smith. And I was watching your video. By the way, I haven't mentioned the Gamble Ramble YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe.
Thank you.
He's got some amazing stories there, but I was
working on it.
Yeah.
No.
But earlier this week, I was watching your episode on the Joys, and it's like these guys sold 20,000 CDs in a time when, you know, CD sales were kind of going in this direction. And it's like
off the stage. You see that gold record there? That's a gold single for the Joys. We sold 5,000 copies of an independent 3-song single off the stage. And apparently in Canada, to qualify for a gold single, you only have to sell 5,000. But not only, it's difficult to sell 5,000.
Yeah, right.
But that's what we did, and I received that gold record for that. Now there's a gold record I did play on, you know. So I got one on top that I didn't play on and one that I did play on. So
that's a good point too. When you brought up, and I interviewed Brian in 2009 too for when I was on air, I talked about how glad I was to see, you know, No Rest for the Wicked, Walking the Razor's Edge, Long Way to Heaven on CD finally, because like that's been those were holes in my CD collection, and I'm like, and I don't understand it. These were all successful albums in Canada, and why are they not on CDs? So
there you go. I didn't count the whole freaking thing.
And then Brian,
you're absolutely right, and it didn't make any sense. And Brian had to. And Brian did it. Brian did it with 100%.
Yeah, he wrote about that too. He had to.
Him and I talking about him doing it. He went to Capitol. It made no sense. And then, of course, when Capitol saw how many he was ordering, they started manufacturing it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a shitty thing to do, if I can use that language. It is the internet. Because then Brian had the exclusive market and was making great money selling these CDs. Now Capitol put them in record stores. Brian's going to get royalties, but he's only going to get 1/10 of what he received from selling them by license. So if you license it from the record company, you basically do a deal where you split the profits. I shouldn't say. I don't know what Brian's terms were.
It's different. Yeah, there's something's got to happen.
He might have bought them for a certain price and then sold them at his own price. But all I know is that Brian had made a lot more money when he was selling them himself, rather than when Capitol sold them. You know what I mean? So it took Brian's gumption for them to wake up and smell the coffee. And then they did eventually put them in stores. And of course, the benefit of that is that now you've got distribution and more distribution. And people can go to the record store and pick it up, which is ultimately what you want, right? Or wanted back then, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I had another question.
Yes.
If you have anyone out there, if you have watched this DVD here, which is an excellent DVD, Glen plays drums on, I don't know, roughly half of the show, maybe, with Fritz playing, Fritz and Brian playing a lot of the other songs. My point being, I found you to be a very visual drummer, and replacing a guy like Fritz Hines, who is also a very visual drummer, did that contribute to you getting the gig, being so visual as a drummer?
I think it might have. I think ultimately that's a question you'd have to ask Brian. But I think that if I were to surmise, I would say, yeah. If you'd like me to tell you the story about how I got the gig, I will.
By all means.
So when Nasty Glass came off the road and eventually became Buffalo Brothers, we settled in London. We all used to live together, and like 5 of us in a 2-bedroom townhouse. And what we would do is we whittled it down to weekends. Instead of playing 6 nights a week, 51 weeks a year, we always took a week off at Christmas to be with family. We would play weekends, and then Monday to Wednesday, we would write and rehearse and demo material. So doing that, we got to know Brian Vollmer because he had settled and landed in London, right? And he is the local rock star, you know, so we became friends with him. And then when Brian and Linda got married, Brian asked me if I could provide equipment for the wedding reception because they wanted to have a jam after, right? You know, do the wedding at the church, and then go over to this hall and dinner and drinks and everything. And then there's gear. You got a room full of rock stars. Who's going to get up and jump? I think me and Aaron was there, if I remember correctly, and a bunch of other Canadian musicians, Harem Scarum guys, and guys from Brighton Rock, and maybe Honeymoon Street. I don't remember, but a lot of well-known Canadian musicians were there. And so I brought my drum kit. I borrowed some little combo amps from friends, and I brought the Buffalo Brothers PA system down. I set it all up in the afternoon, went home and showered, got ready, and went to the wedding. So we get back to the reception, and Ryan says, I said, do you want to get this rolling? He goes, yeah, go get Fritz, And I go over to the table, and Fritz had a lot to drink. And Fritz loved to have a beer and have a good time. It was the only problem with hanging out with Fritz is that my stomach would hurt from laughing after, right? He was such a great guy, so gregarious, and such a great person. But he had been imbibing, and he goes, Archie, I don't want to play, I'm drunk. He goes, I didn't know. In his defense, he didn't know what was kind of expected of him. So I said, okay, what am I going to do? And I went back to Brian and I told him. And then I thought, I'll ask Brian Dorner. Because Brian Dorner has a history with the band. He had filled in for Fritz for shows here and there. I go to Brian Dorner and story. I put it forth to him. I go, do you want to play, Brian? And he goes, Archie, I've been drinking. I'd rather not. I don't want to embarrass myself, I didn't know I was going to be asked to play. So I go back and I give Brian this news, and I'll never forget Brian and Daryl turn and look at me going, will you do it? It's like, oh, the voices of, the clouds parted and the sun shined down and the voices of angels were singing. And I said, would I? I said, okay, I'll try. Like I love the material, but I don't know how well I know it, but I'll do my best. It's a jam. We don't care. Okay. So I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to play Playing with Helix, right? And forgive me, I can't recall if Paul was still with us at the time or not.
When Brian got married, I want to say no.
Yeah,
no,
I think
Paul died in 1992.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it was Daryl Gray, Brian Vollmer, Brett Dorner, and myself, a 4-piece. So I don't recall much about it. Brian's got it on videotape. But I do know one thing. I think I did pretty good, but I can recall I was nervous, right? Because I used to go to the Brantford Civic Center and I'd buy a ticket and be right up front, giving the Mars, And I know we played Make Me Do Anything You Want, which is a cover of a Foot in Cold Water song, right? And I was nervous, and I remember playing it like the Phil Spector style, like Be My Little Baby, right? I'm like, right? So I was like, make me do anything you want. And then Daryl signaled to me, play it in full time. And then I caught on. But for some reason, I always remember that, playing it incorrectly for a few bars because I was so nervous. But the end result was, I must have done something right, because shortly after that, or a few years later, Fritz quit. I didn't even have to audition. They just said, do you want the gig? Well, actually, that's not entirely true. They said, you can have the gig. We did a show in Niagara Falls, and they said, if it goes well, the gig is yours. And the gig, oh God. I don't know. I don't want to monopolize this. There's a great story behind that, but I did the show and got the gig. And there was another guy they were trying out that night that didn't get the gig. And I don't want to hog the screen time here, but if you want to hear the story, I guarantee you it's a great one. You'll love it. May I? Mike?
I think we should hear this story.
Yeah, don't leave us hanging.
So they said to me, when they called me after Brian's wedding, they said, yeah, we like the way you played. Do you want the gig? We're doing a show in Niagara Falls, learn the show. We did a quick rehearsal. They said, if it works out, the gig is yours. And there was this guy. Well, actually, I'm not going to name him because I don't want to embarrass anybody namelessly. It's not important. So we get there, we do sound check, and it's a little rough. The guy hadn't really learned the parts well. And then we get off stage, and he goes over to the bar. And they're between sound check and the doors opening, and he starts pounding tequila shots. And I had one with him. I'll always have one drink, maybe 1 or 2 beers to loosen up before the show. That's it, though. I take the gig seriously. You're at work, right? And I'm going, buddy, you should calm down there. And he's slamming these shots. And I go over and tell Brian and Daryl, I said, I'm not trying to rat anybody out, but you better talk to this guy because he's getting hammered. I don't know what happened if they said anything, but we went on. Okay, so we go on. It's the first show, one rehearsal in Brian's kitchen with practice pads, just running through the arrangement. So we hadn't fully played as a band. We're playing, and this guy is wasted. I'm talking like almost falling down. And playing in the wrong key and forgetting parts and stuff. And so the way it was set up was the back line, which is the amplifiers, were set up in front of me, like at mid-level of the drum set. So part of the drum set was in front of the amps, but I was behind the amps for my hearing. Most drummers set up that way. So we're playing away, and I look over this guy's amp, and there's blue flames and smoke and sparks shooting out of it, okay? On my mama's life, this is true. He turns around, and he's looking at me, drunk boy, right? And I'm going, pointing at his amp, your amp's on fire. And he's going, yeah, we're rocking. I'm going, no, your fucking amp's on fire, right? Over the music. Song ends, and he goes, hey, hang on, my amp's on fire. I'm like, yeah, I only spent the last song trying to tell you. So we did the show, we got back dressing after. And I was looking at Dale and Brian, and I'm worried that this is going to reflect on me as well, right? And the other guy left the room to go get more drinks or something. And Daryl goes, you got the gig. He's never playing with us ever again. And that was my very first show with Helix. Other than Brian's wedding, which wasn't a show.
Yeah.
So there's
well, in a way,
very long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think there's a photo of you playing drums at Brian's wedding in the book, isn't there? I could swear there is.
Hold on.
Oh, he's going to go grab it. There, you've already got it. Yes.
Well, after figuring it might be handy.
Yeah, it might be handy indeed. But another thing that was really cool that came out around the same time as the book was this DVD documentary, which I strongly recommend. I don't know, what's in production, what's available anymore, but if you go to the website, check out.
If Brian has it in his storage, like if he has it in his Helix, like back catalog, it's available.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's all. I only print reprint stuff that keeps selling continuously, like the classics and stuff. I don't even have a copy of that. You know that? I don't even have a copy of that out.
Which is a shame because that was kind of like, this is the first time that I saw you kind of speak and have a point of view of your own, right? And I was really impressed because you were clearly a fan. Like that came across immediately.
Oh, absolutely, right. Yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken, my story gets foggy after a while. I didn't have time to reread the book, but I think after Daryl left the band, you kind of helped Brian out a lot on the side, just more than just playing drums, right?
Well, yeah, but Brian and Daryl and the original, Daryl was in a band called Tracy Kane, which was also managed by Bill Simon Management, which was Brian's manager and Helix manager before they were signed, right?
Right.
So there was a certain way of doing things. They had the Sype way of doing things, and Daryl was the road manager for Helix for a long time. When times were lean. Oh, there it is.
Turn this the right way.
Little old me playing drums.
Archie's first time playing with Helix, and then in brackets at our wedding. So there you
Dorner, Daryl Gray, Brian, and me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Fantastic.
And on the opposite side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hang on. Okay, there we go.
By the way, I titled that book. It was originally called My Life in Music or something like that. And I said to Brian, there's no way. I said, you have to call this Give Me an R.
It makes sense, and it's so immediately identifiable.
I think so. Tim, should I continue on this theme while we're on it, or yeah? Well, I've got the book.
Let's riff. Let's
guys. Brian wrote a nice dedication to me here. I don't know if you can read it, but I'll read it to you. To my son Archie, the guy that thought up the title for this frivolous piece of rock and roll debauchery. Rock you, your dad, Brian Vollmer.
That's so cool.
Yeah, because he was gonna call it My Life in Music or some such adult thing. So no. You gotta call it Give Me an R. Come on.
Well, around that time, that was when the Trailer Park Boys took off.
Yeah,
and of course,
it just works.
That iconic scene where, oh, look at that gentleman over there. Maybe he'll give you an R. And
I'm not giving anybody a fuck. rock.
Anybody hurt? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mike, I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to suggest it again. May I? Because this is a story
Yes, please.
about that
No.
very thing. So
Take it over.
A little background. Brian Vollmer has appeared in cameos in two of the Trailer Park Boys movies, and they referenced Helix in early episodes.
Darn
Ricky
right.
was a huge Helix fan, whereas Bubbles couldn't stand him and loved Rush. So that was the premise for one of the episodes. Now, I'm going to pat myself on the back here, but only truthfully. This is a true story. The episode that you're talking about, where Bubbles
The one that kidnapped Alex Lifeson?
Yeah, well, no.
No.
Yeah, I think that's it. They wanted him to get him some Helix, some Rush tickets.
Yeah.
And they kept talking about I went to Helix. Now that was a Wicked concert. They said,
Yeah.
and everyone get right. I came into the office the day after that aired on TV. And we were doing some prep work for a tour. I was getting back to your theme about me helping. I was tour manager. I would do the advance work for the tourists, taking over from Dale Gray. And I told Brian, I said, hey, Trailer Park Boys featured us last night, talked about the band. And Brian goes, what's a Trailer Park Boy? And I had to explain to him. Well, to his credit, he was in his 50s or something at the time. It wasn't something he watched, and it was a new show. It might have been one of the first seasons.
No, that isn't why I did this. I did this because I'm blown away that you're the guy that told him about it.
Oh, it gets better. It gets better. So I told him, I said, yeah, it's this hip comedy show. It's Canadian, but it's catching on all over the world. Which it is, by the way. I was in Norway, and I saw a bubble sticker on a hydrometer.
Yep.
That's a true story. And in Oslo. But anyway, so yeah, I said, listen, you know what we should do? So it's a very popular show right now. They referenced you. You should, I'll get a contact and we can write them and thank them and maybe send the cast some Helix t-shirts. Brian said, go to it. So I contacted, I believe it was the producer of the Power Hour from Much Music, Jessica Capabianco was her name. We had appeared on, Brian and I hosted an episode of the Power Hour on Much Music. And I set that up for Brian. He was very gracious and asked me to co-host it as a thank you. I contacted Jessica. She got me the director producer of Trailer Park Boys, Mike Clattenburg. She got me his phone number and his email address. I wrote to Mike and said, I play drums with Brian Vollmer and Helix, and I'm the tour manager, and we wanted to thank you. Send me an address, I'll send you some t-shirts. And I connected him and Brian. So I was the connector that caused that to happen. And then Brian was invited to come out and film a cameo. I don't know if you've ever seen the cameo that Brian shot for the TV show.
Absolutely.
Not the movie, but the TV show. It's in the DVD extras. It didn't make
with the letters. Where
yeah, it's
he's
in the extras,
putting,
but it's like with the letters.
yeah, and he's spelling Brian Vollmer. Yeah, that's right.
It didn't make the show. It was an extra. I was invited to come and be in that scene. But Brian, I couldn't afford it at the time. Brian said, I'll put you up in my hotel room. He goes, but I don't want to push it and ask him to fly two of us out. And I understand that. It was a new relationship with, he didn't want to go back and be demanding and say, I want 2 airline tickets. He goes, if you can raise the money, you can come with me, and I'll try and get you in the scene. That's one of the only regrets in my career that I have, is I didn't take it seriously enough. I should have borrowed the $500 from a friend and gone with Brian, because I would be in that scene today. But I did set it up, which led to Brian getting songs from the Trailer Park Boys soundtrack and 2 appearances in the movie. So you're welcome, Brian.
I'm absolutely blown away because I was so happy when I saw that, the Helix reference on the show. And just as a little personal, and just as a little personal anecdote, way back then, I had a prior YouTube channel, which I don't even remember what happened to it, but I made this video and I called it Why I Prefer Helix to Rush. And it included that scene, and Linda found it. And I met Brian in, I think it was 2000, and it was when The Power of Rock and Roll came out. I met Brian at his house, and Linda was there. And she walked up to me and she said, thank you so much for making that video. And I was just like,
Well, you know what, dude? Like you said, that when Brian welcomed you at that show you talked about, hi, Dan. When you talked about Brian welcoming you at that show, when you wiped off your foggy glasses and Brian had his hand out, that doesn't surprise me with Linda either, because that's very much how they've kept Helix alive. It's a very grassroots approach. They respect their fans, go out of their way to be good to the fans and give them value for money and be friendly. So that doesn't surprise me to hear that Linda was like that with you. Because,
and the fact that, you know, a fan is walking around his house and looking at his stuff, you know, that's pretty. I mean, think about that for a second, okay?
Amazing, guy.
Yeah, and
you must have loved that.
Man, like,
right?
Seriously, like, I was like, I can't believe I'm standing here.
Well, you know what? I have to tell you something. Periodically, being in the band for 7 years, it hit me every now and then. The teenage me would pop out going, holy shit. Like, I'm sitting there talking to Brian casually about the weather or something, and behind him is a picture of him with Alice Cooper or whatever, you know, and like, fucking forget who this guy is sometimes. People forget that the extent, Helix had 4 gold, 3 platinum, and 1 double platinum records in Canada. They toured with Rush, Aerosmith, Kiss. You know.
I mean, that's an important part.
Everybody can think One Snake, you know, Quiet Riot, everyone you can think of. Every major sports arena in the U.S. they played. Capitol Center, you know, Washington, D.C., Madison Square Garden, Boston Garden, LA Forum, Maple Leaf Gardens. Hello, Grant. From Grant's Brockway House. Sorry, I'm doing your job. I shouldn't be doing that. I'm sorry. I'm stepping on your shoes. I'm sorry, buddy.
Well, you know what, Glenn? Grant and Tim and I, we did 2 episodes together, the 3 of us, on Helix, including your era.
Yeah, so, we went through the entire catalog.
That's good to know. Good stuff. Yeah. That must have been extensive. There's a big catalog, man.
Well, and I don't. Episodes.
I'm always about the full catalog, and like people need to know. Yeah, you know, they didn't put a couple of records out in the '80s and disappear, man. They're still making music, and you got to check it out. I had a question, if I can just jump in, like in a couple things that reminded me in terms of you as a drummer. I think it's important to note for people that when you sat in with them for the first time at Brian's wedding, it's one thing to have listened to the songs and you know the songs as they are on the album. And even if you're an accomplished musician, if you've never played them before, it's 2 different things. Just because you know how they sound doesn't mean you know all of the parts. You probably know the big crashes and the stops, but as I like to say that, you know, as long as, you know, if a band's pressing, as long as you all stop and start at the same time, that's a pretty good sign. But you know, your visual flair as a drummer, I'm just curious, who are some of your favorite drummers?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, you know, John Bonham is the man, musically speaking, more over anybody. For attitude and visual, I mean, it would be Keith Moon. Economy would be Charlie Watts and Ringo. Economy would be Charlie Watts, and musicality would be Ringo, knowing exactly what to play, where to put it. People don't realize this, but Ringo was like a human metronome. He had an amazing meter. He and Phil Rudd. Both near perfect time. Yeah. So I was never about the guys that do the fastest paradiddles. Like, I love Neil Peart, and I was impressed by him, but I never wanted to be that because I can't be it. And there's already one. So I just tried to play appealing parts musically and then live translate them in a way that the person in the very back of the room can still see and you know, put your whole body into motion and try to feel the music. That's all you can do, is just be honest and play from your heart. On stage, I'm telling you, man, I was watching, I did a thing on my program last night. I reviewed The Warning, the band The Warning, who I love, on the Latin Grammys. And Pal, the drummer, she's 19, 20 years old, 21 maybe. She's had the best posture of any drummer I've ever seen. And she makes the stank face while she's playing, and I get it. Because this is in relation to your question. When you're playing and it's like you're driving a train. When you're a drummer behind a rock band, I used to feel 7 feet tall and bulletproof. Like I could fight the whole crowd with the adrenaline that was going through me. Not that I wanted to fight anybody, but I felt invincible. So powerful. You can feel the floor shaking from the PA and people moving, and you're propelling that. It's better than any drug there ever is. It really is. It's the greatest thing in the world. So that's my take on that. That's kind of a long way around what you asked, but like drummers like Keith Moon made me feel that way. So that's what I aspired to be. A guy like that made you pay attention. Holy shit, look at that drummer. Like, he's really feeling it. Not look at me, stupid theatrics. There's a guy out there that plays in a touring band from the 80s that with a singer from the 80s I won't talk about, but he's so over the top that it's too much, taking away from the rest of his band as far as I'm concerned. Not to talk poop on anyone, but a band should be a unit. You should be able to draw people attention to yourself, but draw attention to the band. Contribute to the energy of the unit. That's what I've always tried to do. If I do any theatrics, it's not look at me, it's look at us.
Yeah.
We're up here. We're not on your phone. We're not on your drink. We're here. Pay attention,
Oh, I love the way you said that. We're not in your phone. We're not in your drink. That's awesome.
True, right?
I want to ask you about another drummer that you didn't mention, but you did talk about on your channel recently, which is Alex Van Halen.
Well, so he was number 5. He was the one I didn't mention, but yeah, he's in the top 5. He's the 5th. Sorry, go ahead.
So folks, if you want to hear like a spoilery kind of review of Brothers by Alex Van Halen, the new book, check out Archie's channel. But I kind of, one thing that you didn't touch on in that, because he didn't touch on it in his book, is I want to know how you feel about Van Hagar.
Well, I mean, Sammy Hagar could fart into a microphone and it would still sound amazing. The guy is talent. He oozes talent, right? I mean, Montrose, forget about it, right? I mean, I like Van Hagar. I think they should have called it Van Hagar, to be honest with you. I really do. It was such a separate entity from Van Halen, but I don't think the brothers' egos would allow that. But the combination of Van Halen and Hagar should have been called Van Hagar because it was such a unique sound. I really like it. I mean, I prefer David Lee Roth Van Halen, I'll be honest. But I prefer solo Sammy over Van Hagar. So all this sounds like I'm saying I don't like it. I actually do really like it. It's just different. You know what I mean? It's just a different version of... it's not like it. I can't see them doing Hot for Teacher with Sammy Hagar.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it took me a long time. See, I got on board because of the age I am. I got on board with 5150 when that came out. And that's just been one of my... Sammy's one of my favorites for a long, long time.
Start to finish, great album.
Of course, I went back and now Mike's doing my shameless plug. I wrote a book about. I wrote a book about Sammy Hagar's solo album.
I planned that question.
That's right.
You're too kind,
I'm going to
Mike.
buy it tonight. By the way, is it available online? Can I buy it?
It's available on Amazon. Archie. Yes. Thank you very much.
Archie, you're the man.
Yeah. Well, actually, if I may be so bold,
please do.
That's actually my 4th book. So when you see that listing on Amazon, you'll probably see my other ones under it, and most of the they're all music books of some sort. And one of them is on. I love talking about Helix because outside of Canada, sometimes you run into people that have honestly they're not as familiar. And I love educating people on that. So I'm always about, the unsung, what's the word I'm looking for? Mike, help me out here.
Unsung rock heroes? Is that?
I guess. Dark horse bands. I don't know what you want to call it, but the ones that deserve the big, the bigger, household name status, but didn't quite get there.
Yeah, sure. That's absolutely.
Case in point, one of the other books I wrote is on, and I'm curious if you're familiar with this band or not, is the band Y&T.
Oh, hell yeah. Leonard Hayes. What a drummer that guy was.
There you go. Yes. I wrote
fast right foot, great.
The one bass. Look, if I, again, be so bold, as far as I know, this is the only book ever written on Y&T.
Nice.
And Mike is in it.
I'm in it.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. You're too kind.
No,
Glenn, how much?
I've read literally, I swear to you, over 1,000 rock and roll related books over the years. I've had separate collections that I've sold, like a collection of 500 that I had to sell when I got divorced, a collection of 500 when I moved to California that I sold. Like I've read easily approaching or just over 1,000 rock-related biographies. So you gave me something new to read. I'm looking forward to
thank
it.
you, man.
And I love Sammy and Hank. And Sammy Van Halen, too, I love. But just to me, the two different
It's
things.
a different, it took me a long time to reconcile the fact that they really are two different bands with the same name. They just happen to be two really, really good bands. I mean, I can listen to Fair Warning, and I can turn around and listen to For an Awful Carnal Knowledge, and I'm happy with that. But and Sammy's always had good drummers. I mean, Denny Carmassi on that first Montrose record. I mean, he's channeling John Bonham, right?
Yeah.
Jason Bonham.
Jason
Bonham.
Jason Bonham, yeah.
Glen,
you know what's funny? His brother Billy Carmassi is also a great drummer.
Yeah, Billy played with Aldo Nova. Yeah.
And this here, if I may, this band is called Vandal. That was my very first professional touring band. The bass player and the keyboard player went on to play with Aldo Nova. The two guys at the end, Tim Harrington and Howard Bertolo.
I know that I know the name Tim Harrington. Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. So Tim Harrington played with them in like the Blood on the Bricks era. Huge Aldo Nova fan, man.
And they went on with Phil X to play with Aldo Nova after
Vandal.
And Billy Carmassi on drums.
Yep, that's right. Wow. But Leonard Hayes, I mean, he's one of the unsung drummers, and you know, I mean, I'm sure you know who I mean by Martin Popoff. I've talked to Martin. Like Martin's in my Y&T book too. He wrote the foreword for it.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. That was Sean. No, sorry, Sean Kelly wrote the foreword for
former Helix bassist Sean Kelly.
Yeah, Martin wrote the foreword for my first book, which is on 8 tracks. Yes, I wrote a book about 8 tracks. But where am I going with this? Martin didn't realize that Leonard only had a single bass pedal. I said, no. One foot, one bass pedal. What you hear on Mean Streak and
known for his fast right foot.
Yeah, Mean Streak and Don't Stop Running. That's one bass pedal. Yeah,
amazing.
crazy.
Amazing,
yeah.
You know, it's wild, man. That's I have to pick that up too. I have to admit that I'm only like a casual fan of Y&T, but I had what was the album with the robot monster on the front?
In Rock We Trust.
Yeah, with the lipstick and leather, and then I played that in a cover band as a teenager. You know.
Awesome.
I'll check that out for sure, man.
Awesome, man.
Great. Good stuff.
Thanks, Archie.
Sorry, Glenn, how much time do you have? We're already at 8 o'clock, and I usually do an hour, but I don't want to impose upon your time.
I'm going to quote Almost Famous here. I'm uncool. I'm always home. You know, like it's Friday night, and I was going to watch Yellowstone in my pajamas, so probably not what your viewers want to hear. You know, I could make up the story about having an 8-ball of Coke in my pocket and going down to the strip bar.
Folks, you can choose your own story.
That would have been true a few decades ago. That might have been true, but
might have been.
I've got time, and I probably talked over talk. So there's things I'm sure you want to discuss that I should shorten my answers, and I will do so.
I've rejected most of my scripted questions at this point, but
I'm sorry, man. That's because of me.
No.
Just to say about Alex Van Halen. Alex Van Halen is one of the few. I'm still working my way through the book. Actually, I haven't finished yet. Alex is one of the few drummers that I think that you can identify without any instrumentation.
Absolutely.
You just hear a bass, like a bass snare and some that's Alex. He's so
snare. The snare. A drummer, he's known for a snare sound amongst drummers, that they call it. That's where Eddie Van Halen's whole concept of the Brown sound. He was trying to get the guitar version of his brother's snare sound.
Yeah.
I mean, Alex tunes high like he tunes his toms high like a jazz drummer. That's why it's so identifiable. They're high and tight. They sound like musical notes.
Yeah.
Instead of like that 80s trend of big. That sound like elephants stomping, right? Instead of drums. You know, it was cool for a while, but then people went too far with it. But Alex always sounded like musical, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, even something as popular as Jump, you listen to the fills in there, they're musical. Like they're.
It's funny, if I may, to answer that, you're absolutely right, because technically speaking, he played Jump on what are called rototoms.
Yep.
And you've ever seen them, the metal rims, there's no shell on the drum. They're tunable. You rotate them to tune them. They're tuned to the notes of the song. That's why they stand out so much.
Why it sounds so
Danny's
good.
playing in whatever key jumps in, the drums are tuned to the same notes. So
I don't think I knew that.
That are part of the musical. It's musical because they're tuned to musical notes.
So for those keeping score, at home, Archie has now taught us two things. He taught us what rototoms are and about primates.
I knew I'd heard about rototoms before because I'm pretty sure that Roger Taylor from Queen used those too.
He did. He had big ones on the end of his kit by his floor toms.
Yeah.
And, he also had a what do you call it? The timbali that made it sound very unique, which is a Latin percussion instrument. That's why he didn't sound like anyone else.
Yeah.
So he would do these rolls, and he would go down the tom, and he would finish, and he would play the rototoms, which had tuned musical notes. There's some there if you can see. Those
okay. Yeah.
So they turn. You rotate them roto, hence the name. There's no shell like an actual drum, but you can tune them to an actual musical note.
So it's like these are in C now, or yeah.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah, and Roger Taylor.
Electronic drums were the same. Electronic drums, you could tune a dial to the note. And if I may, sorry, Tim, but this is something, a bit of Helix trivia. The song "Rock You" starts with drums, right?
Yeah.
And you hear that sound. It's in the key of the song if you listen. Because what it is, it's something like Tom Tremuther produced the Joy's record. He told me this. It's like 3 snare drums overdubbed or something, and one of them is a Simmons drum, the electronic drums from the 80s that were octagon shaped, tuned to the key of the song. So if the song's in D, let's say, they tuned a Simmons snare to give me that note, give me. So when you hear it, the snare drum is it's the same note as the vocal. That's why it sounds so melodic. Def Leppard did the same thing. And Lang would tune the drums. People don't realize it. That's why sometimes some things stand out as sounding more like drum parts sound more like music than just bashing. Because they're actually tuned to a note and a key. So that Rock You've got 3 snare drums overdubbed. I think we said it was 3. And one of them's a Simmons drum tuned to the key of the song.
I have always known like that Rock You has a very unique production to it, but I didn't know why. So that's really interesting. And another thing, I bet you that anybody trying to play those songs in the cover band, why can't we get this to sound the way that it does on the record, and they don't know about that whole tuning thing?
Well, I'll tell you something. One of the hardest bands to cover is Def Leppard because of production tricks like that. Oh yeah, I bet. The drums would be tuned to notes, and they would take a guitar chord, right? So you see my left hand here. Let's say the chord had 4 notes in it. They would take each string at each finger position and overdub, in some cases, not every song, the first string, the note, then overdub the second finger and the second note, and then the third finger and the third note, and construct a chord over 6 different tracks.
Yeah.
The best sound from each string.
Yeah.
Dial in, and construct a chord. To replicate stuff like that live is so hard to do.
That's also why it would back then. Right? That's also back then, before Pro Tools. That's why it took them so long to put records out. So
that's true, right? It's funny when you see that. I've had the privilege of seeing Def Leppard and get backstage passes and stuff, and being right up at the front of the stage. They're so quiet on stage because they plug directly in. They don't plug into amplifiers. They plug directly into things that interfaces that go into the mixing board. So there's no amps roaring on stage. The drums are electronic, and they go directly into the mixing board. So you're not hearing. And the vocals are going directly in the mixing board. So what you're hearing is everything coming through the PA. But on stage, there's no volume. There's hardly any volume. There's monitors, but the actual instruments aren't producing any sound. It's a very strange thing. But it allows the sound man full control out front because he's not competing with the stage sound. He's
Yeah.
got 100% of the sound right at his fingertips. That's why they sound so good live.
And I would imagine it, for the musician's point of view, it also saves hearing, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have the amps blasting off the stage.
Oh, very much so. The best thing that's ever been invented, in my opinion, in the last 25 years for musicians is in-ear monitors.
Yeah.
You know, I've suffered massive hearing loss. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I have what they call profound deafness. I wear 2 hearing aids now. It doesn't affect me on stage at all. It's the only place in the world where my hearing loss isn't a problem, but in conversation and stuff in life. You wouldn't think by how much I talk, but yeah. It's a problem from so many years of touring and loud amplification. But in-ears, you can control the sound, keep the volume down. You know, I'm not ashamed to admit I did cruise ship gigs for a few years for money and to travel the world. And I used in-ears on those, and they were great. The key is to keep the volume down. And you come off at the end of the night, and your ears were fresh. You would take them out. No ringing, no buzzing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's just, it's such an advancement in technology that people should be, whoever came up with those, thank you, you know?
I've heard singers say too that they don't even need to hear the whole band when they're on stage. All they need is a chord, bass, or guitar, so they could stay in pitch. That's all they need.
It's true. You know, like, well, it's funny you mentioned the Van Halen brothers. My case, it's Eddie and Alex only had each other in their monitors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the primitive monitor systems. Like you looked at Alex back in the Fair Warning tour. He had a miniature PA stacked about 6 feet high next to his left, and all he had in there was his drums and his brother, a little bit of David Lee Roth. They played off each other so much.
Yeah.
And now you pop this thing that's molded into your ear, plug it into a wireless battery pack, and you know, you guys ever notice when you go to concerts? The next concert you go to, watch for these. You'll see microphones on either side of the stage that are pointing straight up. They look like antennas. You'll see them on either side of the stage. What those are, they're capturing the sound of the audience and being fed into the musician's in-ears. Because the thing with in-ears is they're molded right to your ears, so it blocks all sound out. So the complaint that people had when this first happened was they couldn't hear the audience applauding. They weren't getting any feedback. It felt like sterile. They'd finish a song.
Yeah.
So they learned to be able to mix in a bit of the audience into their monitors so that they could feel like they were getting some response from people. And also for when they're recording in front of house, doing a live mixing board recording, they can get the audience on tape too. So next time you go to a concert, you see 2 things that look like antennas at either side of the stage. They're microphones.
That's wild.
Yeah,
that is cool. Hey Archie, can I hate to like bring everybody down, but can we get to some like details, some bookkeeping, so to speak? Because I have a CD here that I think you're on, but I don't. The credits here are kind of incomplete, and I'm just wondering if you recall anything about this album. Did you play on some of these songs? Yeah, I know the classic lineup played on 3 tracks here, but there's a lot of these songs that I think were incomplete. And I'm not sure if it's Fritz on drums on all of them, or if you finished drums on some of them.
Can you make that the whole screen for a second?
Absolutely.
And show me the titles again.
There we go. There we go. Nice and focused.
No, that one
okay.
I played nothing on, which was my recollection that I played nothing on. But these days my memory is getting so bad I didn't want to give you the wrong answer. But no, I didn't play on that. I think that's pretty much Fritz, and also some of them are drum machine because Paul would demo with the drum machine a lot.
Yeah,
bring the basic thing to the band, and then they have Paul's leftover tracks and remix them. Some of them Fritz went in and replaced the drum machine. Or here's an example. Brian did a song originally for a solo band called "I'm Alive, Frankenstein."
Yes,
right.
And I'm in the video.
That's right.
But it was with Brian's solo band, 7 Year Itch. That song is a drum machine, and it's one of those songs that was cut. They just kept the drum track, which is a drum machine. But then Helix redid it. I
Yeah.
played over the drum machine. So if you listen to the Helix version of I'm Alive Frankenstein, which is on Half Alive, I think, or that were okay, that's me and a drum machine. But if you listen to the version on Brian's solo record, it's just a drum machine. There's a difference between the two.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
This is the kind of
Yeah.
detail I was hoping to get. And this copy's signed by Fritz and Rainer, who also I think he produced himself. I met them at the Power of Rock and Roll party, and it was the only time I've ever met Fritz. But
he was a great guy. He was such a great guy. He really was.
Really
he was
cool.
He was a true. He was a diamond. He was a true gentleman. He was always gregarious and happy and funny. I always had a joke. I always had a smile on his face. I'll tell you, if I may, I think you'll appreciate this. Helix played the Brantford Civic Center. I'm from Brantford, Ontario. When I was a kid, and I went, and it was on the Wild in the Streets tour, and I was right down front, giving the Mars, right?
That was my first Helix show.
That stage show, if you look at the video for Wild in the Streets, the stage set they're playing on, it's all red brick. Looks like red brick. They bought that stage from April Wine. It was April Wine's Nature of the Beast stage, and they painted it. They painted it with bricks. It's the same stage set. If you look, you can put the videos next to each other.
Yeah, if you watch the MTV, if you watch any of the Nature of the Beast footage from the Live in London, like they're doing Gypsy Queen or wow.
Or watch Wild on the Streets. Watch the video for Wild on the Streets. It's the same stage, same ramps, same drum risers. They painted it and changed it a little, but anyway, that was the tour. So afterwards, they came to hang out at the local bar, which was called the Alexanders in Brantford. They pulled the tour bus up front. And I knew their tour manager, Kenny Haig. Kenny
Haig.
Kenny's a great guy. Kenny took me on the bus to meet the band. And I remember I was 16, I had underage. I've been going to bars since I was 15, playing in them since I was 15. And I was trying to be an adult. And they introduced me to Fritz, and I said, Archie, this is Fritz. Oh, I'm like, nice to meet you, Greg. I thought I'd be cool and call him by his real name. And he goes, yeah, it's Fritz. Like, shut up, basically, right? And we laughed. And he made me feel so welcome. I was a teenage fan trying to be a rock star on this tour bus with this band, and he made me feel welcome, and he was always accepting. He came to a couple of shows, and he would always, even Brian Dorner was the same. Brian Dorner is he's phenomenal. He's technically one of the best drummers in Canada. So I'd always get nervous when he would show up, but he would always say, yeah, you played great, Archie, good job, Play someone's parts in front of them is a very unique feeling. Not always comfortable.
Yeah, didn't Brian play in Saga at one point?
He did.
Brian played on a couple of Saga albums, or at least
you got to have some chops,
He did, yeah, he did.
He was doing Saga. I think he was doing Saga simultaneously with My Wicked Twin at that point as well.
He was.
Which is My Wicked Twin was
kind of a side project for them both. They didn't actively tour with it, but they did some shows, I think, but they didn't actively tour.
I recorded some video on my very first cell phone. I recorded some video of one of the earliest shows, but unfortunately the video is gone now. It was so old.
The format changes so much over the years. It's hard to keep that stuff, right? And it looks like it was recorded with a potato, as they say, right? I've got stuff too. I wish I still had, but you look back on it, it's freezing every second frame, and
Yeah.
Right. I was telling you this before we went live, but I saw Helix at Molly Bloom's in 2006. And Brent was in the audience, and relating to what you said, when the guitar solos came up, saw Brent kind of, just kind of pay attention, and I see him kind of like turn to, and I must have been nerve wracking for the guys that were in the band at the time. They're playing in front of Brent, they were playing in front of Bruce Arnold. I think Bert Zerbrig might have been there that night as well. I think both Sterners were there.
Caleb was a young guy, right?
Yeah.
But I know for a fact that Brett Dorner really liked Caleb's playing and was very supportive of him. So, but for Caleb, poor Caleb must have been shitting his pants. Like, hey, I know the feeling you're replicating. There was a Helix song called Billy Oxygen.
Yes.
From one of the first album. The drumming on that song is phenomenal.
Insane,
and it's Brian Dorner. It's all double bass drumming, which is, I don't play double bass. When he came to see us, I was playing with a single pedal, but I was improvising. And there was no way I could recreate his parts. It's like me trying to play Rush. I don't do it because I can't do it justice. But I did my own version, and I remember Brian saying to me after, "Hey, you know what? I like what you did with that. It was very kind. He didn't have to go out of his way to make me feel better." But
Yeah, Caleb was great.
I said it might have been fine, but it wasn't what you played. And he goes, "No, it wasn't." You know. But
I'm trying to think who was the first time I ever saw Helix. I was late. I mean, I've been a fan for a long time, but I never actually got to see Helix until 2006. They were opening for Alice Cooper, and I know
Brent
the Reichermans were in the band. I'm trying to think.
Brent, Ned,
was it out east? Was it out east? Where you live?
Yeah.
Then that was with Brent Dorner. Brent Neamy on drums.
Yeah.
Yes.
Stan Fountain from Buffalo Brothers on bass.
Yes. Yeah. It would have. Yeah. Jim Lawson,
and
maybe.
I think Reiner and Cindy, who are from Newfoundland, I think were in the band.
Yes. That was
Jim
the
Lawson from Sudbury.
Yeah. That was the lineup that I saw.
Band. Oh God, I don't want to keep taking the time up here, but I quit the band just before that tour. I'll give you the condensed version of this. Every Canadian tour Alice Cooper does is promoted by a promoter in London called Brad Jones. Okay, Brad Jones Productions. They do Rock the Park here in London, the festival. I hounded him. Said, "Listen, Helix is the perfect opening act." When I was still in the band, to open for Alice Cooper. Finally, to shut me up, he goes, "I'll give you 2 shows, and if it goes well, you get the tour." So we did the Chrysler Theater in Windsor with Alice Cooper, and we did Rock the Park. 2 of my last shows with Helix. They went so well, he goes, "You got the tour." And then I left to join the Joys, and they went out on tour with Alice Cooper. Because I thought the Joys were going to be, I thought for sure they were going to get a record deal and go on to the next level. That's a whole other conversation. But I believed in it that much that I walked away from Helix. But I was glad to leave Brian with that present. And Brian would acknowledge that. I think if he was here, he would know that I made the connection between him and Don Jones Productions. And I was relentless with this guy. I said, "You need to give us the shot." And he goes, "You got 2 shows. And if they go well, you get the tour." Then Brian negotiated the tour after that, and I made my exit. But they did that tour. That was kicking myself. I won't lie to you. I was playing clubs with the Joys going, "Shit, I could be playing in an arena right now with Alice Cooper." But, you know, I don't regret anything. The Joys were a great learning curve for me. So, you know.
Did you play Sweden Rock? I have a download here that I made of Rock You 2003 Sweden Rock.
No, it didn't. And that's, oh God, that's another one too. I swear to you when I tell you these stories, I'm not going me, but I am being honest. That was the same thing. I used to hound the promoter relentlessly with emails. Because Helix had #1 record in Sweden. They had a Long Way to Heaven.
Yep.
And I used to say to him, I said, "Listen, you know, my band's had a #1 record in your country." And he finally gave them a shot when I left. After I left the band, I remember we were playing with the Joys in Atikokan, Ontario, which is north of Thunder Bay. And we were having a terrible weekend. They didn't like us, so we were fighting in the band. They were having an argument. And I'm sitting in my room thinking, Helix is playing with Motley Crue and Motorhead right now in Sweden. You idiot. It was one of those kick myself moments, right? But I did. I made that connection for Brian too. And I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to go like this. Brian, I tell you, I'm proud of the fact that I worked really hard for him. You know, like I said, I set up the thing for getting him on the Power Hour. I got him on Off the Record with Michael Landsberg. Remember that show?
Yep.
I got him on that. The Trailer Park Boys connection, the Alice Cooper tour, the Sweden Rock thing. I'm not saying this to go look at me, but I'm proud that I was able to do that for Brian.
But somebody's got to make those connections. Somebody has got to do the work. So
this is rock history. This is rock history that should be. This should be documented. This is important rock history.
Just off the cuff. Just off.
I'll tell you something. That's why he gave me. That's one of the reasons. Another reason why he gave me that gold record. He gave me that after I left the band.
Yeah.
He called me up and said, "No, let's go for a coffee." We went to Tim Hortons, Brian's local Tim Hortons. Brian shows up every morning at 6 a.m. dressed in cowboy boots and a hat like a rock star. The locals all know him. And we sat down and talked. He said, "You know, I want to acknowledge your time in the band. You did a lot to promote that record when it was released on CD, and you did a lot for me, and I want to thank you." And we had a hug. It was nice. I was actually brought a tear to my eye. And that's why he gave me that. He has acknowledged over the years many times that I was very helpful to him, you know. And I did it because I love the guy. Yeah. He's a Canadian icon. And the Canadian Music Hall of Fame needs to get their shit together. Get Helix in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, they earned
I
it.
don't care about me. I'm a footnote. Brian is the one that deserves all the accolades.
He's the 50 years of Helix. He's the 50-year guy.
Years. I'm 56.
Yeah.
6 years old. The band I played in formed when I was 6 years old. That blows my mind.
Yeah.
I sort of. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, no, it's just a thought. You talked about Helix opening for Alice Cooper. I've never heard anybody, which is a shame.
I interrupted you on that. I apologize. You were
No. I do it all. I do it all the time. I do it all the time to people. But Brian, I've never heard any singer come out and mention Brian as an influence, which is a shame. He's got soul in his voice, but somebody that I do hear in Brian's vocal delivery from time to time is Alice Cooper. Especially, it's funny because I got into Alice later. I got into Helix when I was a kid. But I got into Alice, went back very many years later. Yeah. And I'm telling you, if you're big Helix fans out there, folks, if you listen to Welcome to My Nightmare, the song, when he sings, "'Cause life is just a dream here," that sounds like Brian to me.
I never thought of that.
That sounds just like Brian to me.
Well,
you're right.
Brian even says it in the book, and he's told
I know Brian was a fan.
That he was a fan, and Alice Cooper was one of his first big things that he got into.
Yeah.
But that literal connection you just made, that literal reference point, is so true. It's unbelievable. You just blew my mind, Tim. Wow.
Yeah. Listening to that many years after the fact, and going,
good catch.
Dude, that sounds like Brian Vollmer, like in his the lower register.
We all used to do, everyone, this is the thing with Brian, with musicians I know. Everyone used to do a Brian Vollmer impersonation, which is a sign of how big of how unique of a character he is and his unique voice, and how much respect everyone had for him. But the Helix video where he's missing the tooth, right? Everyone used to put their finger here and go, "Get here!" We would do it lovingly. I used to do it to his face, right? And he would laugh. It's funny because I used to do Brian wouldn't do sound check on the road with the band. Like you keep the star away until big shows he would, but bring him out for the show. And I would do check his monitors. The reason I would do it is because I'm hearing impaired, and he's pretty hearing impaired after all these years too, right? I knew what he could hear. If I could hear it, I knew Brian could hear it. So I would do my Brian impersonation and do his sound check for him. Yeah! Loud as I could. Like, okay. He would come out, the monitors would be perfect. So that's just a little tongue-in-cheek story, but it's true, he has such a unique style. And it's getting back to what you said. It's incredible that no one stepped forward and cited him as a direct influence.
It's for all the records they sold and for all the, they played for so many people. There's got to be people out there that just, he's just not someone that comes to mind. And again, I always say, I already mentioned Y&T's. Like, I think Dave Menichetti's a fantastic player. Nobody talks about him either.
Van Halen used to open for Y&T.
Exactly. Motley Crue's first gig was opening for Y&T.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I can tell you part of that is the perception of Brian and Helix as being as to guys like me in the era we grew up in as a local. He's one of us.
Right.
But people that are bitter about their lack of success or arrogant, well, it's very rare for them to give people kudos for their success. You know what I mean? Well, Brian is the guy from London and Kitchen or whatever. Yeah, well, Brian's also played Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think he deserves more kudos than he gets. Helix as an institution does.
Yeah.
After 50 years. 50 freaking years, man.
I couldn't tell you how many times I used to draw that logo on my school books, man.
Yeah, it's a great logo. Man.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's symmetrical. It's perfect. Yeah.
There's been versions over the years. I used to have a kick drum head from when I played with them, and and I regret selling it. I sold it at a time when I needed some money. I auctioned it off.
Just one more thing, Mike reminded me.
I wasn't into it.
How cool would this look on vinyl? 12 by 12.
Well, when I messaged him about your cassette, I'll plant the seed about putting some stuff on vinyl too. So.
And this is a short enough album. It wouldn't have to be on 2 records. They could put it on 1.
There you
Nice
go.
and easy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Look
it's a
at
good
that.
record.
Mine's signed in black
We're all
pen and yours is
comparing
signed in silver.
We're all comparing our Brian Vollmer autographs.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I bought a bunch of the CDs off the website all at once, and I think I got 4 all at once. As a matter of fact, it might actually literally be these 4, like the B sides. These 2 are sort of Canadian and international counterparts to each other, right? Because they both got the same.
Yeah, that's right.
Brian with that hat.
One's on Capitol, isn't it? One's independent.
Yeah, that's the Canadian one because they owned all the. Yeah.
Brian did a reverse. Brian licensed it to Capitol.
Yeah.
And they just put a different artwork on and released it. That's what it was, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and some different tracks as well, so that if you want to have them all.
That's right. That's
yeah.
Because Capitol owns the masters and stuff. Here's the thing. Brian can't just put out versions of Rock You.
Right.
Without their permission because they own the master recording.
But yeah, and that's unique for a lot of that's the same for a lot of bands. But when they put out that best of 1983 to 2012, when they put that out, there's re-recorded version of Rock You and Deep Cut. And
there's a reason. Sorry if I may.
Yeah, so they can license them.
So Brian can replace the song.
Yeah, exactly.
Trailer Park Boys wanted to use Rock You.
Yeah.
But then the royalties and money would have went to Capitol EMI.
Right.
And Brian felt, rightfully so, after all these years, he should get the money. So if he gave them his master, his re-recording, he would be able to get the licensing fee instead of Capitol EMI because he owns the master to the new version. That's
absolutely. Yeah, the mechanical royalties. But what I'm getting at is they're good remakes.
They're
really for that. Yeah, they're really faithful remakes. They're really good. They're really well done. Because sometimes
do a great job.
Sometimes bands do remakes and they just don't cut it. But these are.
I know.
If it I'm a really nerdy fan, but if somebody had that playing, I wouldn't have immediately picked up the fact that, oh, those aren't the originals. I wouldn't have because they're that well done. All the vocal inflections and everything's in its place.
Totally.
Gentlemen, I have to plug in or I'm about to die. Can you give me 2 seconds?
Okay, yes.
I didn't realize we were going this long. I should have plugged in.
I apologize.
No, I'm having a great time.
I want to ask him about this too because
I do think we have to apologize to our good friend Grant. Sorry, Grant, we didn't invite you. After all Grant's done to help me promote, but he's in the chat. So
no, I'm ready, guys. I'm into it.
Cool.
I don't want to interrupt too much of your Yellowstone evening, but
don't worry about that. I'm not crazy about the show. It's okay, but it's not like I'm in love with it or anything. I just gotta find my power cable now.
See, I was probably just gonna rewatch Deadpool and Wolverine again.
Nice. Okay, here we go. Houston, we have liftoff. We're back.
Excellent,
baby.
And speaking of liftoff, you were once in outer space.
Yes.
Technically speaking, this is the first Helix studio album in almost a decade. They've done the B-sides, they've done different other things, but as like a technical studio album, this is the first one since 1993's Business Doing Pleasure. So with that in mind, did the significance of that hit you back in 2004 or whatever this is? I think, 2004. Did the significance of that gap hit you back then?
Yes, but here's where I'm about to blow your mind. That was supposed to be a Brian Vollmer solo album.
I did not know
and
that.
It was started as a Brian Vollmer solo album, and I was booked as a session drummer to play on it as a Brian Vollmer solo record. So what happened was this. Brian's solo band, 7 Year Itch, had started writing that album. And I don't want to disparage anyone, but it wasn't working out with the drummer for some reason. Brian asked me to come in. And came into the basement. We were doing pre-production, working on the songs. The songs were written, but they were not arranged. And that's one thing I always have a strong hand in is arrangements. I'm very good at it, not to be self-congratulatory, but it's true. Brian said to me, I feel bad about the other drummer being let go. I'm going to keep his name on the writing credits because he was there for the writing. But technically, what I did was also writing. I added parts to the songs. Remember, Brian goes, it's only going to sell a couple thousand copies. I'm only going to print a few thousand copies. So he goes, I'll pay you a session fee instead of writing credits. And I said, that's fine. That's the business end of it.
Yeah.
And then the bass player wasn't cutting it. So we brought in Stan, who became the bass player in the Buffalo Brothers. Or in Helix, sorry, from Buffalo Brothers. So it started out, though, we went to the studio as a Brian Vollmer solo album. And then Brian realized, somewhere along the line, if you heavy up the songs, make some changes, because it was a lot more lightweight of an album. It was more rock than metal. Tailored it to be a Helix album, and he's going to do better with it as a Helix record than a Brian Vollmer solo album. I don't know what made him change his mind, but the session started, I was hired to play on a Brian Vollmer solo album. Rockin' in My Outer Space was what that was supposed to be. And then, we tailored it to be a Helix record. So, to answer your question, once I knew it was going to be a Helix record, we brought Mike Hall in to play some stuff and Jerry Finn. It gave it a sharper, harder edge, and we rearranged some stuff to make it more Helix-like. Then, it was, I think it's a pretty eclectic album. I mean, there's trombone and stuff on there, some songs.
Yeah.
I love this album.
It's good. It's good. It is there. There's some experimentation on there that I like.
But now you know why, because it was supposed to be a solo record.
But the funny thing about that,
normally do on a Helix album, trombone and things like what's the song?
There's Sunny Summer Days, which is very different.
16 Underground and Sunny Summer Days would not normally be Helix.
Right.
Helix record, but Brian.
But they work. I think 16
Underground
is fabulous.
Having them up a little, right? Originally,
I'm surprised. I'm actually surprised that you say that this was more of a rock album before, because it is heavy as heck. It's like one of the heaviest Helix albums at the end of the day.
Terminology. It was more rock and roll than hard rock.
Right.
Is what I'm trying to say. I mean, by rock and roll, I mean like it was more like showing Brian's early lighter music influences. And then once we decided that it was going to be a Helix project, of course you have to put some hair on it, you got to put some Marshalls on there. You got to tailor the songs a little differently for the Helix audience, right?
It
really is a fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating combination of Brian's solo interest and the Helix sound. I like it. I think it's got some really good songs on it.
We lost Tim. We frequently do lose Tim, unfortunately. The internet where he lives in New Brunswick isn't the greatest. But I really liked it when I first heard it, and I thought to myself, it's a little bit more. I'm not going to say grungy, but it's definitely on the heavier side. And I thought, well, this is a really good adaptation to sort of like this new world that we live in musically after grunge came and cleaned the. Clean the decks.
I'll tell you something. The guys that originally, as I said, the guys from Brian's solo band, were guys that are a little younger, and they loved Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, and a lot of those songs are drop tuning, which means the E string of the guitar is tuned to D, which is the basis of grunge music.
Yeah.
That's where they get that heavy sound. A lot of those songs started off sounding more like Pearl Jam than Helix. But then again, once we realized it was going to be a Helix project, what a Helix record is supposed to sound like. So some changes, you can make. You put a guitar solo by Mike Hall on and crank up the Marshall. It's going to sound more like hard rock than it's going to sound like eclectic Brian Vollmer solo. But it started off life as a solo album. Yeah.
And
isn't that cool?
I must say that I'm being blown away here tonight by some of these revelations. We're gonna have to promote
there's stuff I know that I can't tell you, but
of course. Yeah. But I think we're gonna have to promote this as like grab a stack of rock exclusive.
Yeah.
But some of it is. I mean, I would never betray Brian and tell stuff that's like
of course,
not meant for an audience. But there's some stuff that I know he wouldn't mind me sharing with you because enough time has passed.
Yeah.
I gotta understand something. I have so much respect for Brian Vollmer. Like he took me at a time when my band had lost its record deal, and I thought that's it. That was my big shot. What am I going to do? It didn't work. And I got to join a internationally known recording act and a national touring act. And he helped me pick myself up and sweep myself. I will never forget him for that. He gave me the chance to feel like speeding up a little, like a somebody, right? You know, like, I love Brian very much. You know, it's truthfully, if I'll go as far as this, I wish I was still playing with him at this point. But I understand that why they went the direction they went with. And I will tell you this, though. I did get a lot of calls and emails. After a respectful period of time, after Fritz passed, a lot of people contacted me months later saying, so are you going to be playing with the Helix? I would have in a heartbeat. And I did let Brian know. I said, I'm available. But I know why also that they went in the direction they did with Jamie Constant. First of all, he's a great drummer. And he was a good friend of Fritz's. And he plays with Daryl. He and Daryl have other projects that they do. So, of course, Daryl's going to bring his drummer to the table. And I understand why that happened. But I've also let Brian know if they ever need a fill-in, I would come back in a heartbeat. I'd love to do shows with Brian again. You know, I have so much respect for that guy. He's amazing. Yeah. So there was a tangent. I mean, there's a tangent for you going off on a...
Well, you know, he's been known for a long time. You call him the hardest working man in Canadian rock and roll. So there's a reason for that. I've talked to so many guys over the years that have been in Helix, and, you know, most recently Sean Kelly, and the amount of respect.
Oh, I got in, by the way. Sorry to interrupt, but I got shot. I hate that I just said that, but it's true, and it also sounds like I'm going, I did this, but I did do it. Sorry, go ahead.
What? Sorry, what's that you did do?
You got Sean in the band? Like,
I was wrong. This is the thing. It's Sean in his book, I think. Sean interviewed me for his Metal on Ice book, by the way, if you've read it.
Right. Yes, I have that somewhere.
I mean, and pretty extensively. I don't know if it was that book or his other book, but he got the story wrong. I knew Sean from Crash Kelly. And we were chatting online, and he said, listen, man, if Helix ever needs a guitar player or even a bass player, let Brian know. I'd love to do it. And I told Brian who Sean was, and I connected them. Sean's always attributed it to someone else. Brian's always attributed it to someone else. It wasn't. It was me. That's fine. But I'm being honest with you. It's the truth.
And Sean did join on bass, which was, I remember posting that news on Facebook. Sean Kelly joins Helix on bass. And I remember friends of me were messaging me saying, Crash Kelly, Sean Kelly playing bass?
Yeah.
But, you know, the guy
asked me. I
anything.
had the email. I was showing the email. I said, Archie, if there's ever a chance, I remember it almost verbatim. If there's ever a chance, I would be honored. And I'll even play bass, is what he said. And I passed that along to Brian and introduced them electronically. And then when it came to pass, it happened. But I wasn't in the band when it came to pass. Can I address something real quickly that you just said?
So freaking yes.
People being in Helix. This is, if I'm going to be a truthful interviewee, then I need to be truthful. I didn't always agree with Brian's perspective on things. And one thing that kind of got to me sometimes was the turnover of musicians. Looking back on it, I understand that Brian had to do what he had to do to keep things moving forward. But there's a lot of people that would do one or two shows and then go through the rest of their life telling people they were in Helix. Well, you played a show with Helix. There's a difference. Not to sound petty, but you know what I'm trying to say? It's I felt he was a little loose, fast and loose with it sometimes. Like, I felt like he didn't realize what an honor it is and that he should use that to be a little more cautious with who he hires, because some people just want to be able to say they played with Helix. Does that make sense? Can I tell you a funny story real quick?
I would want to have Helix on my resume.
And there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that it's just name dropping rather than appreciation. You should want to play with Helix because you love the music and you love Brian. You know, I remember Sarah Smith. Brian did some Christmas shows around southwestern Ontario, and Sarah Smith was really popular at the time, and hired her to play rhythm guitar and gave her a spot in the show. And I remember her calling me up, kind of needling me. She goes, "Well, I'm in Helix now too." And I kind of went, "Yeah, I let it ride." But no, you're not. You did some shows with Helix. There's a difference. You know what I mean? To me, it's. I hate that I'm going to say this, but I'm being a truthful interviewee. It cheapens things, I think, when you let people come in and out like that. I understand that Brian did it because he had to do what he had to do. But to me, it's a valuable thing to be in Helix. And I think that you should, if you're going to do the gig as a musician, you should be respectful and know that you're part of a Canadian institution. Don't get in there just for some money or get in there just to be able to tell your friends you played with Helix. I sound like a dick right now, but it means
No, I get it.
to me that it means something to me that I replaced Fritz, who was a seminal member of that band. I was honored and did my best to carry that tradition on. But I've seen people that were dismissive of Helix, and they're musicians that with gigantic egos that were in Helix. I will not mention any names. That behind Brian's back would be dismissive of him, and I always called them on it. I said, "Well, if you played Madison Square Garden, then shut the hell up."
Yeah.
So I didn't want this to take a negative turn.
No, I know exactly what it's because I want to go back real quick, just from a fan's point of view. Like I said, when I saw Helix opening for Alice Cooper in 2006, it sounded great.
Yeah.
Brian sounded great, but when I'm looking on the stage, it doesn't look like Helix. So
it was Brian Vollmer.
Yeah, I remember being really excited when Vagabond Bones came out that 4/5 of that seminal Helix lineup were back. And you look on stage, there's Daryl, there's Brent, there's Fitz, there's Helix.
Tim, I'm going to tell you something, and I've never told anybody this, and this is, again, one of those hand on my heart, swear my mother's life moments. That is 1,000% true. Towards the end of my tenure with the band, I talked to Brian and I said, you know what? We've hit a ceiling here with promoters, with money and the number of festivals and stuff we could do. You should get the 80s lineup back together, and I'll step aside and just be road manager. This is the truth. I swear to you. I swear on a stack of Bibles. Brian looked at me taken aback, and I said, I'll still want to be involved. I think I'm a good road manager. I said, but I'll step aside and do that. But you need to put the band back together. It's time. Now, at the time, he was feuding with someone in the band, and I won't say who. It's not my place. He goes, no, I'll never play with that person again, which ultimately he did. So I think that he had to come to the conclusion on his own. But a couple of years later, he did.
But the idea was germinating, right? You.
I'm telling you.
Because
I'm looking into the camera in your eyes and telling you. I literally made that offer to Brian. This is what you need to do. We hit a wall. It's great. It's fine, but it's not progressing. It's not going up. For you to go up, you need to put the original 80s lineup back together. And then eventually the seed blossomed. And he did.
Yeah, there's so much to be said for when you get younger fans into the music. They look at the old videos and they go, well, I just saw Helix, and
who's that guy?
Aside from the singer, I don't recognize any of these.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It became a revolving door. It became a joke, to be honest with you. It did. This is me speaking as a Helix fan.
Yeah.
And I'm not being a hypocrite, because I stayed for 7 fucking years, man. There's a difference between that and coming in and being a fly-by-night, not respecting the gig. I saw that happen, and it hurt me that people would do that to Brian, come in and not have the proper respect for the band.
Yeah.
And the place in history. That's rock. You're part of Canadian rock history if you play with Helix. You really
if
are.
I may say something, one thing you notice, and I would never disparage anybody who's been in Helix, because I love every lineup of that band, whether it lasted 2 minutes or 2 weeks or 2 years, right?
Sure, of course, yeah.
When you watch this 30th anniversary DVD, there's certain members of the Helix band, past and present, that have a certain je ne sais quoi, as the French say, a certain stage presence. And you were one of those members who has a stage presence. But the second that Brent the Dr. Durner walked on this stage, all of a sudden things changed. And there's one song, Rainer had to fill in, and Fritz too. But I'm a bit of a Brent fanboy, so that's why.
Well, I'm just saying, they had that. They had that thing.
Yeah, but there's a moment, okay, and I can't remember which song it is. It might have been Billy Oxygen, but Rainer was playing Paul Hackman's part, and Brent is on the stage, and he points at Rainer every time it's time for Rainer to trade off to the solo, and it just had this rock star aura to it that only Brent the Dr. Durner could bring to that stage. The veteran, it just elevates everything. And as Tim said, when Vagabond Bones came out, and it's like, Brent's back, Daryl's back, Fritz is back. We've got the
Yep.
surviving members back, and it elevated the whole thing. And no surprise, that album received a lot more attention.
Deservedly so.
Deservedly so.
And as a fan, I was on the sidelines going, "Fuck! Finally, yes."
Yes,
That's the truth.
exactly.
I was willing to step aside. I was willing to cut my own throat to get that lineup back together because I'm that much of a fan. It's true. You know, there's been choices that Brian has made over the years of people when I was in the band that I have just wholeheartedly told them that person is not the right fit for this. But Brian's also strategical as any leader, a general in an army, a president of a corporation, a politician. It has to be. You have to be strategical in your choices. So there were people that were offered the gig because they brought something else to the table. So they might have been on the minus side with the charisma, stardom thing, or what being a proper fit to Helix, but they had something to bring. I can't even say it. I won't say it.
Well, to use an example, and again, I'm not saying anything bad about anybody, but Rainer was a producer as well, so that brings a whole.
You just answered to what I was trying to not say. Yeah. But I can say it. You know what? That's on me, and I'll say it politely. I didn't think he was a proper fit for the band, image-wise and otherwise. He's very technical, Rush, Alex Lifeson kind of guitar player. Great fucking guy and a great musician, but I didn't think he was a Helix member. Cindy was awesome, but I mean, they're both awesome. See, don't misunderstand me. But he owned a studio and a rehearsal room that we could use, and brought that to the table, and is a fucking great guitar player.
Yeah, but I mean, he was playing Paul Hackman, you know.
In terms of fitting in, him and Brent were like, you know,
oil and
marmalade
water
and steak. You know what I mean? Like they just didn't go together, right? No, I'm not disparaging anyone. I'm talking about difference in taste.
Right.
Like one's complete opposite of the other. As a fan, I never agreed with him, but Brian always had his reasons for doing things. And that's why we're sitting here talking about Helix 50 years later.
Exactly. If he hadn't made decisions along the way, especially during those lean years in the 90s when bands like Helix were persona non grata.
Well, you know what, Tim, and if I were you and I were sitting in that audience looking up, I'd be going, what the fuck? I'm being blunt. I would be going,
you know what?
Well, I'm glad it's Brian. I can't think of how many of those bands we played with over the years. Oh my God, dude, where there was nobody from the original band on that stage.
Yeah.
And if you have a second, I can tell you a story that's I think will blow your mind.
I just want to say one, but I just want to say one thing before you do, which is, you know, there's lots of bands who have had lineup changes and made choices that maybe didn't work out, like even Motorhead with Robbo Robertson on guitar.
Sure, yeah.
But, you know, I say there's no shame in it because what's the saying? The show must go on. So, yeah, no shame.
As long as it's Brian, to me, there's always going to be Helix.
Oh yeah.
Well, here's the funny thing.
It's a sliding scale of quality, but there's always going to be Helix as long as there's a Brian.
Well, here's the funny thing, and I only found this out when I bought this, but you know, Brian was always the only original member. You know, right back to the beginning, because
the first gig at the high school battle of bands to the last gig will be a Vollmer.
Bruce Arnold, Don Simmons, Keith Burt Zerbrigg, all these guys. Sorry. Go on with your story, please.
Well, this is in direct relation to what we're talking about. And you guys will like this one. We did a show with Humble Pie, Helix opening for Humble Pie in Windsor, Ontario, right across the river from Detroit. We were playing literally in the parking lot of, or park on the water, right across by the casino, the Caesars Casino. You can see Detroit behind us, right? And I was excited because I loved Humble Pie. Now, of course, at this point in time, you know, Steve Marriott was dead. But it was just Jerry Shirley, the drummer. He was the only remaining member. But I was excited because I loved Jerry Shirley's drumming. Jerry Shirley also played in Fastway. So the great drumming on those albums.
That first Fastway record
Feeling Easy Living. That's Jerry. That's Jerry. What a great drummer. So I was excited, okay? So we get to the gig, and I'm going, okay, well, it's only Jerry Shirley, but at least I get to see Jerry Shirley. Okay. So we load in and rig the gear. We're waiting, and I see the tour manager for Humble Pie, and I'm talking to him, and I go, when's Jerry going to get here? And he goes, oh, Jerry's not playing. This is a summertime gig outside. Said he broke his leg in a water skiing accident. So there's a guy filling in, and I go, what, you mean there's going to be no members of Humble Pie? He goes, well, they're members now. And I go, yeah, okay. They went up and played, and it was a singer named Charlie Hunt who had sung with Ted Nugent over the years. All these players were really great players, but they were guys like me. They were, guys that went in and filled in and sidemen, right? 4 sidemen, not one guy from Humble Pie. Now, Humble Pie was successful pre-MTV, so no one knew what they looked like.
Mm-hmm.
So they managed to pull it off. So listen to this. They sounded great. They did great. No harm done, except for two people that knew the difference. 6 months later, I'm talking to a soundman friend of mine, and it's wintertime. He goes, hey, Archie, you'll never guess who I did monitors for the other night. Humble Pie. I said, oh, with Jerry Shirley on drums. He goes, no, Jerry wasn't there. He broke his leg snow skiing. I went, excuse me? Because he broke his leg water skiing in the summer. So I made a call to an agent I know. And the agent goes, yeah, Jerry Shirley owns the name Humble Pie. He lives in Ohio, and he sends out 4 guys who are a little bit younger, in their 50s, whatever, as opposed to him being in the 70s, right? Pays them a sideman fee, collects the lion's share of the money, and that's his pension plan. The fans don't know the difference because they were not known for their videos, right? You know what I mean? Oh, there, we lost him. But isn't that mind-blowing?
I don't want to trash too many bands, but there's been other bands in the news lately.
But I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say this trash talking. What I'm saying is people don't realize that this happens all the time. We played so many festivals with so many classic rock bands over the years that literally didn't contain one original member.
I'll tell you a funny story related to that. Is I was telling you earlier offline that I used to manage a record store, and right around the year 2000, Journey were touring with a singer named Steve Augeri.
I remember that. It looked like Steve Perry.
Looked a lot, sounded a lot. Anyway, a woman came into my store and
Steve Perry with curly hair.
Curly hair, yeah. A woman came into my store and said, I just saw Journey. Oh my God, they were great. Do you have their new album? Steve Perry is back. And I said, I am sorry to tell you this. You did not see Steve Perry. You saw Steve Augeri. And it was like this. It was like, so there you go. Like,
well, you know what, dude, I get it. These guys, this is all they've ever known is playing music. The guys that are from the original bands, somehow the ownership of the name gets shifted around. It's not like Brian now owns the name Helix, but he didn't know it. Bill Sipe owned it. That's a whole other vlog. But Quiet Riot came through while Frankie Vinale was sick and fighting cancer. God bless him. I heard he was a brilliant drummer. Did you know, by the way, that that's Frankie on Moni Moni by Billy Idol? That's Frankie.
I had no idea. I had no idea.
He was on
the studio session, not the live session, the live version, the studio version. That's Frankie Vinale.
I had no idea.
Yeah, he did a few hit singles. He was a session player. But anyway, I digress, as I do in my own vlog. They played here in Grand Bend with Chizzy Pearl singing, and there wasn't one member of Quiet Riot on the stage. But they hired a drummer that had long curly black hair, black goatee like Frankie's, and he played Ludwig Green Sparkle drums like Frankie's.
The guy from Typo Negative. I can't remember his name. Kenny.
Well,
Kenny.
And it was good. You don't get a gig like that you don't suck and get a gig like that. But the point is, a friend of mine came up to me, just like you said, Mike, the same story. He said, I saw Frankie Vinale play the other night. It was great. I said, no, you didn't. He goes, yes, I did. Long curly black hair, the devil beard, green sparkle Ludwig. I said, no, it's not him. This is how it can get away with it, right? I'm of two minds about this because I realized, especially Frankie Vinale, he was dying of cancer at the time, owning the name Quiet Riot, sending out a band to work so that he can have an income. God bless him, I understand. And I will say this about the Humble Pie story I told you. Apparently, Jerry Shirley would occasionally, in warm weather and when he was up for it, tour. he would go, you know what, I'll go out with the 3 sidemen and go out as humble pie. So I'm not trying to be entirely negative about it. I'm just saying that people don't realize that it happens, right? Look at the CCR that's touring. It's the drummer and the bass player, right?
Yeah. And the guy sings just like John Fogerty.
Exactly. It's the same
Except he's
thing that
bald
Mike
and he
was saying.
plays a Wolfgang.
Same thing Mike was saying about the guy that sounded just like Steve Perry.
Yeah.
So you got to ask yourself, is anyone being harmed? I don't know. As a music fan, I'm a little offended, but as a working musician, I know why they do it. Because they can. And what are they going to do? Go work at McDonald's?
Exactly.
Yeah, they have to in some cases.
They're 70 years old, and it's all they've ever known.
Yeah.
You know,
no, and at the end of the day, the music is being played in front of a live audience by competent musicians. So, ticket buyers, at least,
that's a very good point.
That.
And by very good musicians. You don't get those gigs by sucking, even if it is the real Quiet Riot members. You don't get to play for the brand name Quiet Riot unless you can play.
Yeah. And, speaking of Quiet Riot, the Guess Who for a while there were going out there with Rudy Sarzo on bass, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a guy who can...
Brett Fitz is my friend. He played drums some shows for the Guess Who too.
Oh, no, which is ironic because that's the band where the only original member was the drummer, Gary Peterson.
And he did the humble pie thing. He sent them out with Brett Fitz and a bunch of other young guys with long hair. But these are the bands that get away with it the most are the bands that were pre-MTV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You don't know what they look like. You know what they sound like. Well, unless you're a hardcore fan, you don't know what they look like because there were no videos of them being blasted at you 24 hours a day. So they were able to get away with it. And at the end of the day, people walk away from a good show with a smile on their face. But I understand why Cummings and Bachman got upset about this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, because it was diminishing the brand. It's a business. Never forget it's the music business, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, they had the chance to buy the name and they didn't.
Yeah.
Kale offered them the name for $1 million in the late 80s, early 90s, and they said no. So who's to blame? Who's to blame? Kale had the foresight to register the name.
Yeah.
The Guess Who. But
that
then he
brand
drove
name
it into
is
the ground.
everything.
He drove it into the ground and cheapened it to the point where they were playing for $2,000 a night at local pubs.
Yeah.
So when all of a sudden you get Bachman and Cummings back together, trying to make it a special thing, and they're asking for $2 million, promoters are going to go. They played down the road last week for $2,000.
Yeah.
Well, no, they didn't, but technically, legally, they did.
Yeah.
That's a whole other. We can have.
I'm fascinated by this. Yeah, I'm fascinated by this type of thing. Or when you have two versions of a band at one time, like Rat for a while.
Great White, LA Guns.
Yeah. Even back as far as the Supremes, Motown used to send out 3 black girls that had no connection to the Supremes.
Yeah, that's right. They did.
Deep Purple.
There was a fake Deep Purple.
1980 with Rod Evans, the fake Purple.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically, if you think about it, in those boundaries, I could form a band and call it Helix.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm stretching it.
I used to joke that you could. Yeah, I used to joke that you could make a Kiss.
I can't. Morally, I wouldn't.
Right.
But
I used to joke that you could make a Kiss just out of the former members of Kiss and just call it Kiss, and you'd have all these original guys and all this stuff. And that's how we get these messy band histories. That if you go to Wikipedia, you go to the LA Guns Wikipedia, and it's just a mess. It's like trying to disentangle this. And to be honest with you, for a long time before I started doing this, I was kind of curating the Helix Wikipedia because it was so neglected, and I did the best I could.
Convoluted too,
very. But you have clarified a lot of stuff, because when I did the Wikipedia entry for B-sides, I didn't know who was playing drums, so I put Glen Gamble for most of the songs that weren't credited on drums, and now I know.
Well, I can see why you would. You would, because it was my era. Brian decided to finish that project off. I get it, and I checked to see if I played on it. You had to show me. So there's so many little things here and there that songs have been taken from and put on that I've been on that I might not have been aware of, right? So I mean, here's the thing: these LA Guns, as you said, I tell you at the end of the day exactly what this comes down to. Tracy Gunn's trying to pay his rent. It is.
Yeah, fair.
He's He's only ever known one thing since he was a teenager. Never forget, these people were signed. Look at Tommy Lee, 18 years old.
Yeah.
By 19, he was a millionaire.
Yeah.
He's never had to work like an adult. Kind of.
He's never had to be an adult because
he's never had to
everyone
go to the
around him
grocery store
said
and
yes
buy
to him because
groceries.
He's famous. Everyone says yes to him. He was a millionaire at 19. I'd be dead if I'd had $1 million at 19. I'd be seriously, I'd be in the ground right now. So expecting a person like that to be a normal person is you can't. You have to cut them some slack. And a guy like Tracy Guns, all he's ever known is he's a teenager, dyeing his hair black, getting on a tour bus and going and playing sex action, right?
Right.
So if his choice is to do that or go work at Staples, what's he going to do? He's going to hire 3 guys that'll take $150, $200 a night and go out and play and put $1,000 or $2,000 a night in his pocket, plus merch money, and then hopefully live through the year. Tour for 6 months, 5 months, 3 months, 6 months. Take that money and live off it for the rest of the year. How do I feel about it? As a fan, I don't necessarily like it. As a working musician, I understand it. You know what I'm trying to say?
That is the best way to put it. But, you know, I want to also just highlight the bright side of all this, which is in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, such as LA Guns, such as Helix, some of those core members do come back and you do get a sort of a classic sounding lineup back again. And I'm glad Phil Lewis and and Tracy Guns have kissed and made up. They're back together.
I agree. And
you know, we have a Helix now. Unfortunately, Brent's retired, but we have Daryl in the band. Daryl's backing vocals are important, as Tim and I were discussing earlier.
Daryl's a phenomenal singer.
Yeah.
He was an Irish tenor. His voice is beautiful. We used to do Delilah by Tom Jones. We did a heavy.
It's on.
And Daryl nailed it. Yeah. Yep. That's
Delilah. It's on this.
That's me on
that.
There
you go.
We used to do that, and we did the Alex Harvey band version, which was heavier. But Daryl nailed it. That's a hard song to sing. Tom Jones is a great vocalist. Daryl's an amazing musician. You know, I'd rather go see Brian and Daryl, and again before Fritz passed, as Helix, than Brian and 4 other guys, and that includes me. I know how the fans feel. As much as I like me, I'd rather see Fritz on drums with Helix. So, you know, to encapsulate that, I'm not putting myself down. Like, the Guess Who, with Gary Peterson and Jim Cale on bass and 2 other guys that I don't know, I wouldn't go see, to pay money to go see, if I'm being frank. Cummings and Bachman, with 2 other guys, I would pay to go see as the Guess Who. That's just me speaking as a fan. But I'm a nerd. I know excruciating minutiae of music.
Yeah.
My brother, God rest his soul, who just loved to put on the Guess Who and listen to it, would have gone to see either version and enjoyed either version fully. So who's getting hurt?
Nobody.
Right?
Nobody.
Glen,
I want to ask you 2 more questions. Number 1, is there any chance we can have you come back and do some more nerding out? Because I am absolutely blown away at your passion, knowledge. Like, dude, you are a fan and you are on the inside track and you know the business, and I'm just blown away. I can pick your brain for months.
Anytime, brother, anytime. You guys are amazing. I really bow down to what you guys are doing, because I can see your love of music, your love of rock and roll. It shines through you, you know what I mean? And those are my people. That's my family, you know what I mean? So anytime, brother. I love this format. I want to ask you off the record sometime to teach me about this, because I'd like to start bringing guests on to the Gamble Ramble. I just don't have the technical know-how.
Well, and that was my follow-up question. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the Gamble Ramble, why you started YouTubing, and what you're up to. I mean, I know what you're up to, but maybe they don't.
Sure. Well, I'll give you an answer, encapsulate that as precisely and concisely as I can. You know a band used to be called Rebel Few from Cambridge?
Yeah, they're buddy of mine, Daryl Law. He introduced me to the Rebel Few.
Fantastic band. They're Sterling Wingfield, Pantera's producer, does their stuff. They're from Cambridge, Ontario. Their guitar player, Barry Martin, great guy and a good friend of mine. He came up with the title Gamble Ramble. He'd seen me post before it was a thing, just telling some stories online. During COVID, especially, I had no creative outlet. And I like to be a creative person. He goes, why don't you do a vlog, a channel? People are doing that these days. Call it the Gamble Ramble. I thought, well, that's a cool name. And my friend Rose Hurst designed the logo for me. And then it started to feel like a thing. So I did it. And at first you guys know, I talk too much. I like to talk. And I would meander. And I would lose my focus. And I would lose people. And people would tell me politely, you know what? We'd like to hear what you have to say, but you got to focus it better. So as the years have gone on, I've gotten a little bit better at it. And I'll tell you where I turned the corner.
Is he frozen, Tim?
He must be, because you're moving, because I've frozen up a couple of times now.
We may have lost Archie.
My phone has held out this long.
We may have lost Archie. Maybe his battery died. Let's hang on a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And but I will tell folks, the Gamble Ramble is a great channel. Check it out. He's putting up content pretty much daily. He's there's a band called The Warning out of Mexico that he mentioned earlier that he just saw, and he's raving about this. A lot of people. Oh, he's back. Okay, let's get Archie back on.
My iPad, despite being plugged in, the battery drained. It's an older
I figured.
Version, so I'm on my phone right now, but do you want me to wrap that up, that answer?
Yeah, and then we'll get you back, man.
Yeah, just like I started covering the band The Warning.
I was just saying, yeah.
Well, I covered them once, and the feedback was insane. I went from having under 500 subscribers to over 1,200 in weeks, in a couple of weeks. My viewership went through the roof because their fan base is so loyal. I did it out of love and respect for this band. They're so good, and I really love this story. They're a real rock and roll band. But their fans will reward you if you discuss them online. They're so hungry. It reminds me of me when I was a Kiss fan. They'll take anything they can get about the band. And I'm now eligible to be, what's the word? To make money off my channel now.
Yep.
Right.
All because of the Warning fans. All because of the Warning fans.
Yep.
So that's an amazing thing. So for that reason, I might be stupid, but I'm not a dummy. No, I might be a dummy, but I'm not stupid. Anyway, I'm nobody's fool. So the point is that I realized that if you know how to direct your energy, the rewards will come to you. And I've been doing a lot more Warning-centric stuff because I do love the band. And my subscribership keeps going up. My watch hours keep going up.
I've noticed this myself. I was like,
and the more
looking at your channel.
The more it succeeds, the more I want to do it because it feels like I'm finally getting the niche, making shorter vlogs, being more direct in my speaking. With you guys, I'm verbal diarrhea, right? But my vlogs, I'm trying to tighten it up, and I really enjoy it. I'm going to Mexico in this winter to play for a little bit. I did it last year too. I just go down there and play cover tunes in a little surf town, and the money pays for it's not really for money. It's enough to feed me, but it keeps me down there and out of the cold for a bit. And I've just bought a brand new kit that I'm restructuring, which is a replica of the very first kit that I ever bought, which had a lot of meaning to me. First professional kit my mom bought me. And when I come back, in the spring, I'm going to start actively playing again. But it was a weird couple of years. I had a lot of personal things happening in the family. I lost my mom and both my 59-year-old brothers in an 18-month span. They all died within 18 months.
I'm so sorry.
My brothers they didn't even hit 60. They were only a year apart. They all died within 18 months. So I was grieving pretty badly and going through a lot of personal problems because of it. And now that I'm settled in a new apartment, I got a new kit. I'm going to focus back on getting into playing at least semi-full-time again and come 2025. So there's your answer, basically.
Wow. Well, Tim, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up? Because I'm afraid I haven't eaten any dinner yet tonight, and I got some ribs.
I just have to thank you again, Archie, for your support of my books. I really appreciate. I hope you like them more than anything. I'm
really looking forward to reading your book, and I will spread the word on my ramble about your book. Maybe we could do an interview after I read it and discuss the
Listen,
book.
I would love to do that. All you got to do is shoot me an email, timsvinylconfessions@gmail.com. I'm easy to get a hold of.
It'd be amazing. You guys can have me back anytime you want me back. You can count on me. I've had a great time tonight.
Dude,
Awesome.
we have no shortage of topics that we can discuss.
Yeah.
So
We're all music nerds, right? Which is great.
Absolutely. Well, look behind me. I mean, this.
Well,
So,
you know what the best thing about being a musician and being able to be like, I played. I'm sure you guys. I don't know if I told you guys. I got to play behind Dee Snider. I've played with Ace Frehley, Lita Ford. I played drums for the Four Horsemen for one show.
what?
We can talk about it another time. Yeah.
I
Did
had
you
Dave
want to
Lismy.
wrap up? Did you want to wrap up with that story? Or?
Shit.
Okay.
You know what? I really do have to eat, but I had Dave Lismy on my show 2 years ago with Tim. It's like,
Yeah, Dave's a good pal of mine.
it's a small world.
We did 6 weeks with them with the Buffalo Brothers, touring across Canada twice when our album came out.
See, this is all undocumented rock history right here. It's all undocumented.
Well, it's a pretty cool thing. I'll tell you about it. So halfway into the tour, the last show of the first half was in Windsor, Ontario. And then there was a 3-day break and 2 or 3 day break. I forget. The next show was in Edmonton. Okay. So we all drove through the States to save money and mileage by driving through the States to get west. Randy Cook was a hired session player from Toronto. He was playing drums for us, but he went back to Toronto to do some session work on his days off and was going to fly out and meet the band. So this was a Saturday night, okay? We went to bed, got up next morning, and then started to drive to Alberta. Randy drove to Toronto, did his sessions. So the day of the Edmonton show was like a Wednesday. The crew sets up the Four Horsemen's gear at a gig called the Thunderdome. And they can't find Randy. So they come to me and they said, would you do sound check with the band? Randy's flight must be delayed or something. I said, sure, no problem. And I was a fan of that band. After 3 weeks of touring with them, halfway into the tour, I knew some of the songs. So we played Rockin' Is My Business, rocked out. It was great. And it was a thrill for me. So the stage, that night that we were friends with them by then, the tour manager goes, you might as well just use Randy's drums tonight. That way you don't have to set up in front of them. I said, great. So we did the show, Buffalo Brothers, sold out. And we were top 10 in Edmonton at the time. We had a single called Stone Me that had charted top 10 in Edmonton. Crowd was singing along. It was a great night. And Sean Sanders and I had done a live drive time interview on the Bear FM in Edmonton that same day. So we do the show, come off stage, and I'm having a few beers. I'm pumped, the after show feeling. Tour manager comes and taps me on the shoulder and says, the band needs to talk to you in the dressing room. So I go, oh, okay. So I go up to the dressing room. I'm walking in. It's like a funeral. Silence. I go, why the long faces? They said, we just got a hold of Randy. He's in fucking Toronto. I go, what? The show's in progress, right? They said he thought the show was tomorrow and his flight's tomorrow. Can you play? Could you do the show with us? And I went, fuck. Do you have the CDs? He goes, yeah, right here. I said, give me that Walkman. I put it on. I started listening to the beginnings, the intros, and the endings. And the rest we can do through language, through communication with each other. Stop. When a guitar player puts their neck down, they're signaling someone to stop. When you see James Brown live and his hand went like that, he's trying to tell the band to stop. There's a language amongst musicians that I knew would get us through the night. And I grabbed the bottle of Jack Daniels and I took a deep slug and I said, a prayer to God I'm not sure I believe in. Let this work. So we went out there and we played. And we did the first couple songs. And I guess I had picked up more of the show than I knew after 3 weeks of watching them every night. Because I would go out and watch them after our set every night. The guitar player, not Dave, but the rhythm guitar player, he told me it was his favorite show of the tour. I'm not trying to dismiss Randy at all. Randy's 100 times the drummer I am. Technically, he's amazing. But it felt great. Like I'm a hard-hitting drummer, and it was a good rock and roll show, right? That's my wheelhouse, AC/DC type music. So after the second song, Ron Young from Little Caesar was singing for them, right?
That's right. That's right.
Four Horsemen fans, you might notice a different face back there behind the drums. That's our buddy Archie from the Buffalo Brothers, who you might have just seen playing. Archie's doing us a favor, and he's filling in for Randy. This is where they made it rock and roll, right? Randy got in a fight and got thrown in jail. And the crowd goes, and I'm
Stay on brand.
okay, whatever. I just go with it. Because that was their whole thing. Biker, ACDC type biker rock, you know. There's tons of bikers there, girls in leather, you know.
And Frankie actually did spend time in jail.
Yeah, and he said the perfect thing to get the crowd on our side. Like, fuck the cops, right? Like, Randy's in jail. So Archie was nice enough to fill in. And we kicked ass that night. It was great, I have to say, modestly speaking. And Randy flew in the next day, and the tour continued. And it was just like we all had a big laugh about it. The Randy was in jail joke, you know. But yeah, so I played one show with the Four Horsemen.
There you go. And he doesn't go ahead and he doesn't go ahead and call himself a member of the Four Horsemen.
Yeah,
that's notable. Yes.
Well,
and, by the way, I want to make sure I encapsulate that story by telling you something. Randy is a consummate professional.
He's awesome.
He was given wrong information by, I think, the band's publicist who booked the flights and took care of that end of things. She gave him the wrong date to be back, is what I was told afterwards. So it wasn't his mistake, because this guy he's a pro. He lives in LA.
He played on Rick Emmett's.
Everybody, right?
He played on Rick Emmett's solo debut.
You know,
Smash Mouth, no way.
Yeah, he does session work with you know, Mandy Moore and all these artists. Like
I knew that.
He played on a lot of hit records. He played for Ringo Starr for a while. Wow. He was Ringo's drummer. So anyway, yeah, it was not to make it clear, it wasn't Randy's fault. Randy's too professional for that, but he was given some wrong information and missed his flight, booked his flight for the wrong day. But anyway, yeah, I played drums with the Four Horsemen for one show. Isn't that cool?
It is freaking amazing. I hate to end the show, but I have to eat. And I'm sure you have to watch Yellowstone.
There's some video somewhere. Some of our crew filmed it. I've never been able to get my hands on it, though.
See, there's bootleg out there. And anyway.
Yeah.
Archie, I want to say thank you. I want to do this again. We'll get you guys back. We'll get both of you back, and we'll just riff about freaking music appreciation all night long. But folks, subscribe to the Gamble Ramble on YouTube. Check out some of these amazing Helix albums that he is on, and just rock and roll. Share the love. We all
thank
love
you, Mike,
music.
and thank you, Tim. I'm looking forward to curling up with your book tonight. God knows it's the only thing I'm going to bed with.
Well, on that note, folks.
Me and Sammy Hagar.
On that
it
note,
won't take
folks.
long. It takes about a couple days for Amazon to get them to you.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really enjoyed it, and I'll come back anytime.
Take care, guys.
You,
as you know, we always like to go out on a song. So let's go out on something from Ontario, not London. This is Hamilton. But let's go out with some Jacob Moon. This is a song called Someday. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And we will see Archie back on Grab a Stack of Rock.
Thank you.
Cheers.
I'm gonna play us out with a song that's for Mr. Eric Litwiller here, and for you know, the good old times of living in Kitchener-Waterloo and all that good stuff.
Awesome.
And this is a Steve Earle song. All right.
Yeah.
Because I know that Eric is right into Steve Earle, or was.
Big time.
We
Big
both
time.
are.
All right.
We both are.
All right. So here it is. It goes something like this. There ain't a lot that you can do in this town. Drive down to the lake and then you turn back around. Go to school so you can learn to read and write. So you can walk into the county bank and sign away your life. I work at the filler station on the interstate. Yeah. pumping gasoline and counting out of state plates. You ask me how I sent to Memphis, son, and where's the nearest beer? Well, they don't even know that there's a town around here. Someday I'm finally gonna let go. I know there's a better way. I wanna know what's over the rainbow. I'm gonna get out of here someday. My brother went to college 'cause he played football. Me, I never even got through high school at all. Got me a 67 Chevy, she's low and sleek and black. Someday I'll put her on the interstate and never look back. Yeah. Someday I'm finally gonna let go. I know there's a better way. Well, I wanna know what's over the rainbow. I'm gonna get out of here someday. I'm gonna get out of here someday.
Wicked.
Beautiful team, man. Awesome.